Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Tomorrow's Romance Dawn, Old Version, by OtakuWithHazelEyes. The Straw Hats have left Drum, ready to take on Baroque works in Alabasta. However, upon making a pit stop at a mystery island, they come across something they never expected to find: an older Zoro. Now they must locate the future crew, as well as keep treasure out of the hands of bounty hunters. Adios.
Hang on, future Usopp. Luffy hollered at the top of his lungs. I'm coming to save you. When Luffy had gone charging into the jungle, one might have assumed he actually had an idea as to where he was going or what his plan would be. After all, he looked so sure of himself when he took off. Anyone who might have assumed that was giving Luffy too much credit. He barreled through bushes, tree roots as big as the Mary, and the occasional animal who made the mistake of getting in his way. He thought he was going in the direction the explosion was, but the trees were so tall that he couldn't see the smoke plume anymore, if it was still there, that is. He'd heard a few more explosions since then, but he couldn't tell where they were coming from. In his random charge, he'd accidentally become tangled up in some of the lower hanging vines of the jungle. Damn it, he shouted, trying to wriggle free. Stupid vines. I have to find my nakama, so let me go. Luffy's constant wriggling only served to get himself even more tangled, and caused to move farther up the vines. Finally fed up with the plants, Luffy flexed every muscle he could and threw his arms apart, effective tearing the vines to pieces and releasing himself from their snare. He laughed in triumph, only to realize a moment later that someone worked his way up a considerable height off the ground. He began to fall, but thanks to his quick reflexes, he was able to stretch out his arm and grab hold another vine. The sudden force of him jumping onto it, causing it to swing. Experimentally, Luffy swung forward and jumped to another vine. Yahoo! Luffy cheered, swinging on the long, green vine. This is awesome. He swung from vine to vine, before landing on one of the high tree branches. It was high enough that Luffy could see the beach in the distance, more of the jungle, and even some large rock formations with interesting shapes. The sun reflected off the shiny tree leaves, making the jungle sparkle. Man, this place is amazing, Luffy said to himself, shielding his eyes bright sun. I'd love to explore it. I bet my future self is having a blast. He was actually looking forward to meeting his future self. Zoro-san was a future Zoro, and he was so strong. He bet his future self was really strong too. Luffy briefly wondered if he could challenge himself to a fight. Zoro had wanted to do that before, but everyone yelled at him that was stupid. Future Luffy was probably stronger than anybody, and if Zoro-san was any hint, his crew was really strong as well. They'd made it to this new world place after all. Luffy placed a hand on his beloved hat. I will make it as a pirate. Someday I'm gonna gather a crew that's even better than yours and find the greatest treasure in the world. I want to become stronger, stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And even stronger than that, and then I'll be able to protect anything. I won't have to lose anyone ever again. Zoro, Nami, Usopp, Sanji, Chopper, Brook, Frankie the shipwright, and a woman named Robin. He didn't know much about the last two, but if they were in his crew, they had to be great. Brook certainly was. As for the first five, they were all still there, according to Zoro-san. Vivi wasn't around anymore, but Zoro-san said they left her behind in Alabasta. He had to wonder why though. Vivi was his friend, didn't she want to stay with them? He supposed he'd just have to find that one out when the time came. Nami was right. 2 years was a long time, now that Luffy thought about it. A lot could happen in that period, especially for pirates. If he still had all his friends after sailing the seas for 2 years, he hadn't broken his vow. He was going to be a great pirate and wasn't going to lose anyone. That was all he needed to know about the future. It was going to be a good one. And if anything bad happened, he'd noticed Zoro-san's weird looks, but if he wanted to talk about it, he would have. They could handle it and get through it as a crew. They were all really strong, so no need to worry anymore of their future. And speaking of the future, that's right, I'm supposed to be helping future Usopp. Stupid vines. Why'd they have to distract me like that? Luffy looked from side to side. Maybe he could spot future Usopp from where he stood up in the tree branches. After several minutes of looking, he could make out the vague outline of someone walking through the trees. The leaves made it difficult to see the person clearly, however. That has to be him, Luffy said to himself. This looked to be the general area from where the explosion came. Luffy shot his arms forward, stretching to one the trunks of the trees near the person. He pulled back a couple times to make sure his arms were taut, then jumped off the tree branch. Gum Gum Rocket. Luffy's arms snapped back to their original length, taking the Rubberman along for the ride. He moved through the air like a bullet, or more accurately, a rocket. And in no time at all he crashed into the tree he originally latched onto. This left the huge crater in the trunk, and also sending the man who had been standing in front of it tumbling across the jungle floor. I made it, Luffy shouted, pulling his head free from the trunk. He turned around. Usopp, I'm here too. What the hell was that? Luffy stopped his greeting. The man sitting on the ground, eyes closed and clutching the side of his head was most definitely not Usopp, unless Usopp underwent some serious physical changes in the next 2 years. It was a reasonably tall and muscular man who appeared to be in his late 20s. He was very pale, with messy banged black hair that fell past his ears save the left side, where the hair around his ear and on part of the back of his head was shaved off. He had a curved scar on his right cheek, trailing from his jaw to just under his eye. He wore a high-collared red and black leather jacket that fell to above his navel, and the fact it was unzipped revealed the man had foregone wearing a shirt. He also wore a gray belt, dark pinkish-purple cargo pants, black boots, and gray fingerless gloves. Luffy, however, was focusing more on the fact this guy had 2 holstered pistols strapped to his belt, and a double-barreled shot rifle strapped to his back. He was also focusing on the medallion around the guy's neck. It was a gold disc the size of a fist hanging from blue-green ribbon, and the metal was imprinted with the image of a sideways eye. Whoa, Luffy thought. That medallion is really cool. I mean, seriously, the man growled. He opened his eyes, revealing them to be a deep shade of red. What kind of world-class idiot would just launch into a tree without any kind of... He stopped when he noticed Luffy. Oh, that kind of world-class idiot. Luffy's jaw dropped. This guy's eyes were red. Not red like Zoro's when he woke up from a nap too soon, but red as in the circle Lee parts around the pupils. Red eyes. Why was that familiar? Wait a minute. The man had red eyes, pale skin, and his eye teeth did look kind of pointy. Ah! Luffy cried out. He pointed at the man. A vampire. I'm not a vampire, the man sighed. Clearly, this wasn't the first time he'd been mistaken for a blood-sucking monster. He crossed his arms and pouted. Why does everyone think that right off the bat? No way. You can't turn into a bat. No, I can't. And that's not what I said at all. Pay attention. Luffy was still pretty sure this man was a vampire, but, for now, would listen to what he had to say. Just because I have red eyes, pale skin, and slightly pointier than average eye teeth doesn't automatically make me a vampire, he went on. That's just being prejudiced against my appearance. Oh, okay, Luffy said, standing up. He bowed. I apologize, vampire guy. I'm not a vampire, he repeated, this time more forcefully. And my name isn't Vampire Guy, it's Vaughn. My name is Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy shouted back. The man who will be king of the Piran raised an eyebrow. Monkey D. Luffy? As in Straw Hat Luffy? The Rubberman nodded. Yeah. What of it? Vaughn reached into his jacket and pulled out a piece of paper. Not that Luffy could see, but Vaughn was looking at his wanted poster. Yep, it's definitely him, Vaughn thought, examining the grinning boy on the poster. I'd heard rumors Straw Hat was some kind of idiot, but I didn't think it was this bad. Hard to believe this is the same guy who dropped a warship in the middle of the Battle of Marineford. Then again, I shouldn't underestimate him. Whatever. As long as I can complete my mission. He looked up, only to see Luffy had collapsed onto the ground. What are you doing now? He asked. So, hungry. Luffy said weakly. Need. Food. Left the lunchboxes, with Chopper. Vaughn's sweat dropped. You've got to be kidding me. Wow, this is some of the best food I've ever eaten, Luffy praised, digging into the bento box with gusto. And I've eaten some really good food. Did you make it? Vaughn, who sat cross-legged in front of the pirate while holding a bento of his own, sweat dropped. Are you kidding? I can barely boil water. Nah, one of my teammates made it. She's good at cooking and stuff like that. Still, you must get pretty hungry if you were carrying 2 lunches, vampire guy. I don't, and I'm still not a vampire, he replied, a vein pulsing on his forehead as he took a bite of crawfish. That lunch I'm not entirely sure you're actually tasting belongs to Runo, but he ran off to go play with his toys. Serves him right. Luffy paused mid-chew. Who's Wuno? Just another teammate, Vaughn replied, replacing the lid on his bento. He leaned forward and rested his chin on his fingers. Now, mind telling me what such a high-profile pirate such as yourself is doing out here in the middle of the jungle? High profile? Luffy wondered aloud. He swallowed and shrugged. I'm trying to find one of my nakama. We all saw an explosion and I was afraid he was being attacked. So naturally you just went charging into the jungle to find him and offer aid if needed. That's right, I don't know why, but something about that plan doesn't sound like it was thought through. Luffy shrugged again. I've never needed to think my plans through before, everything always turns out okay. Somehow, I sincerely doubt that, Vaughn said dryly. Luffy swallowed the rest of his food and placed the lid back on the box. Thanks for lunch, vampire guy. You're all right. For the last time, I'm not a, Vaughn began, before sighing in defeat. Forget it. I don't care anymore. Anyway, what does this friend of yours look like? Maybe I've seen him. He has a long nose and carries a slingshot, Luffy described happily. He's also a liar. Why tell me that last part? Vaughn thought. I can't say I've seen him personally, but the description sounds an awful lot like the sniper that's been pushing Aridy's buttons. Luffy wilted. Oh, I see. Thanks anyway, though. I guess I'll just have to. He froze, Vaughn's words fully registering with him. Wait. Did you say, Aridy? Yeah. Why do you ask? Luffy frowned. That name sounded awfully familiar. Not me personally, but Miss Aridy did say they were having issues with a sniper. Aridy was one of the names Tattoos gave his crew, right before he shot himself and right after he'd been asked if the bounty hunters had encountered any of his future friends. Oh my gosh, Luffy gasped, bouncing to his feet. You're one of the New World bounty hunters. You're just now realizing that? Vaughn asked, also standing. Wow. You're really something, Straw Hat. That's to be expected, though. Blood King, Enoch Vaughn, first lieutenant of the Carrion bounty hunters. Vaughn pulled his rifle off his back and opened the chamber, casually popping in bullets. Despite the fact you were kind of annoying, I enjoyed sitting down and eating with you. But now it's time to get back to work. Luffy took a defensive stance. You bastard, if you're one of the bad guys, why'd you give me food? Actually, if we look at this from the world government's point of view, you're the bad guy in this situation, seeing as I'm the bounty hunter and you're the wanted pirate. The red-eyed man pointed out offhandedly. Then again, I was never one for politics, and I'll have you know my parents were married. That doesn't explain why you gave me food, because even a fool can see you can't fight well if you're hungry. Plus, I owed Runo some payback. I know for a fact he rigged that coin toss. Luffy cocked his head. What was this about a coin toss, huh? Never mind, Vaughn said, waving it off. He clicked the barrels of his rifle back into place. Fact of the matter is, I've been ordered to take you down. Boss and Aridy figured turning you in will place the former back in the good graces of the Navy. I personally couldn't care less about that, but I am interested in taking on the infamous Straw Hat Luffy. After all, you have a rap sheet as long as my arm, so you at least must be a challenge. A rap sheet? Luffy asked. It's a list of all your actions that pissed off the government, the bounty hunter explained. You know, taking down Sir Crocodile, instigating the Enies Lobby incident, taking a bunch of world nobles hostage. He was met with a blank expression from the pirate. And judging by your blank expression, you have no idea what I'm talking about, do you? Luffy's silence was all answer Vaughn needed. Now that I think about it, you seem to be missing that scar on your chest. I remember seeing you have it in that one newspaper article, Vaughn went on, giving Luffy a once-over. He snapped his fingers in realization. Oh, now I see. You're one of the others Siobhan was talking about. Can't say I totally expected a younger Straw Hat to show up, but I'm glad to see the island didn't disappoint. Do you think the government would give us double the bounty if we turned in two of the same pirate? Nothing was said for a while. Both men simply stared at each other. Vaughn waiting to hear what Luffy had to say, and Luffy letting what Vaughn said sink in. Finally, Luffy's eyes trailed from Vaughn to his red eyes to his rifle. Hey, are you a sniper? What does that have anything to do with what I just said? Are you? Vaughn sighed. He seemed to be doing that a lot in the last 20 minutes. I have several different skill sets, but yes, being a sniper is one of them. And those guns of yours, Luffy went on, pointing towards each of Vaughn's weapons. Can one of them shoot needles that knock people unconscious? You mean my tranquilizer darts? Vaughn placed a hand on one of the pistols on his hips. I don't have any on me right now, but my sidearms and my rifle are all modified to shoot both darts and bullets. Where are you going with this? Luffy's fists clenched, his teeth grit together, and his blood began to boil. Red eyes and a sniper, just like Zoro-san said. Then you were. Chopper gestured to Zoro-san. I pulled them out of his body. He's lucky, though. If anyone else had taken that much tranquilizer into their body, their heart would have stopped. You were the one who tried to kill Zoro, Luffy screamed in rage. The rubber captain was practically radiating killing intent. In that instant he forgot about Zoro-san's condition and his warnings about the new world. All he cared about was making the red-eyed man pay for trying to hurt his nakama, future version or not. I have the strangest inclination I've made you angry, Vaughn observed. He sighed for what seemed to be the millionth time that day and gestured for Luffy to step forward. All right, bring it on. Gum gum pistol. Luffy shouted, throwing his fist forward. Vaughn was crouched close to the earth before Luffy's fist was even a foot away. The red-eyed man took advantage of his current position to attempt to kick Luffy's legs out from under him. He nearly made contact, but Luffy sprang upward and smacked the palm of his hand on top of Vaughn a launching pad to get airborne. Gum gum Gatling. The rain of rubbery punches beat the earth, sending rocks and clumps of plant life flying in random directions. However, much to Luffy's frustration, not a single one hit Vaughn. The bounty hunter agilely outmaneuvered them, often sidestepping out the way before a punch even came close. It was almost as if he knew where they would impact. It's like before, the part of Luffy's mind that was still rational thought. When Zoro-san was predicting Sanji's attacks. Vaughn performed back handspring to remove himself from the Gatling's path, and once back in crouching position, he yanked his sidearms from their holsters and fired exactly one shot from each pistol. If Luffy hadn't been so angry, he would have grinned. This guy was a dummy if he thought bullets, and they were too round to be darts, would be able to hurt a rubberman. Still midair, Luffy stretched out his arms, expecting the dull feeling the impact of the bullets would make on his body. What he did not expect was to feel the sharp, agonizing pain of one bullet each going through his shoulders. Arg! Luffy fell to the forest, writhing and trying to clasp his shoulders, but his arms were locking up and refused to do anything. Luckily, the wounds weren't too bad, but they still bled freely. That's right, Vaughn said with mild surprise, blowing smoke from his pistols. Being a rubberman, I bet you've never been shot with bullets before, so you had no idea it would hurt so much. Luffy grit his teeth and lifted his head, giving Vaughn a dirty glare. How did he do that? He was a rubberman, bullets always bounced off, so why not now? The bounty hunter rubbed his temple. And I hope you appreciate the effort I'm putting into this. Coating individual bullets with hockey gives me a migraine. Hockey? Luffy briefly wondered what that was, but decided he didn't care. He jumped to his feet, ignoring his pain. He ran towards the red-eyed man, fist drawn back to give him the punch of his life. However, Vaughn was going to have none of that. Oh no you don't, Straw Hat. Vaughn whipped his rifle off his back, but instead of firing it, he gripped both hands on the tubes, wielding it like a club. With a strong swing, the butt of the rifle clocked into Luffy's head, sending the pirate crashing into the ground, and it hurt. Blunt attacks weren't supposed to hurt. They never did, at least not to Luffy. The only blunt attacks that hurt him ever were Nami's punches. He still wondered how she did that, and I told you, I want to be a great pirate, like Shanks, young Luffy barked. Unacceptable. Garp shouted. You're going to be a great marine, Luffy, not a filthy pirate. Says you, sounds like somebody wants a fist of love. Pound. Oh, Grandpa's punches hurt the most. Normally, Luffy would avoid remembering anything involving his grandfather, but in this case, it was warranted. Garp had always managed to hurt him with his punches, despite being a rubber man. When Von clubbed Luffy with his rifle, it felt like one of Garp's attacks. "Man, you are so weak," Von sighed, disappointed. Then again, you are a younger, inexperienced version of Straw Hat. I really shouldn't have had any high expectations. He raised his rifle up to hit Luffy again. No, Luffy was not going to let this freak get another attack in. As the butt of the rifle came down, Luffy grabbed it and yanked down, bring Von down with it. Once he was close enough, Luffy drove his foot right into Von's stomach. The bounty hunter made a choking sound. Luffy then swung his leg, foot still planted in Von's gut. So Von was thrust into the ground, specifically on some nearby rocks. Where Luffy lacked in his experience, he made up for tenfold in raw power. Blood flew out of Von's mouth as the internal damage took hold. Luffy got to his feet and took a few steps back, breathing heavily. His shoulders bled and ached. He had a bruise forming on his head, but nothing made him feel more invigorated than finally landing a hit on Von. "What's the matter?" Luffy panted. "I thought you could predict my moves." Von grunted, then pushed himself into a sitting position. "Fat lot of good that does me if I can't avoid it." "Nice move there, Straw Hat. You really got me good." He wiped the blood around his mouth away with the back of his hand. "However, making me bleed doesn't really help you in any way." Luffy ground his teeth together. "Like I care, you hurt my friend, and are still trying to, you're going to pay." With that, Luffy charged forward and stretched his arm back. Gum. Von rolled his eyes and raised his right index and middle fingers. "You are so reckless." "Bull." Von gestured his fingers towards himself. "Sanguine needles." Luffy felt something sharp. No, wait, there was more than one pierce his body, and froze mid-attack. His arm fell limp. A dozen red spikes, several feet long, had appeared out of nowhere and were sticking through Luffy's body at multiple angles. "Oh!" Luffy cried out. He tried to move, but the spikes held him in place. "Where did?" "Look down, genius," Von replied simply. Luffy did so, and saw that the spikes were coming from red, wet-looking spots on the ground. Even from spots that looked like they were where little drops had fell. Was that blood? Luffy asked aloud. "Congratulations. I guess there is a brain somewhere in that rubber head," Von said sardonically. He stood up and waved his hand, and the spikes retracted out of Luffy's body before melting back into puddles of blood. Luffy fell to his knees. "Whether I bleed or you do, it doesn't matter. It still gives more weapons to fight with. Blood is malleable in my hands to do with as I see fit." The blood that was on the back of his hand peeled off, forming into little streams that collected into a sphere on his palm. With a flick of his wrist, he threw the sphere, now a hard spike, into one of Luffy's wounded shoulders. Luffy didn't cry out, but he did grunt in pain. Von smirked. "You may be a rubber man, but I'm a blood-controlling man. My name is Enoch Von, and I ate the blood fruit." Luffy reached up and ripped the blood spike from his shoulder, "So I was right." "Eh?" Luffy looked up, a fire in his eyes. "You really are a vampire?" Von's eyebrow twitched. "What the heck?" Normally, Von liked to think he was a calm, collected person who could take anything in stride. Straw Hat, however, caused him to break the mindset. How is it possible for someone to be that dense, and that stupid? "I am not a vampire," Von snapped, probably for the first time in his life. Location: Carrion Bounty Hunter Camp. Siobhan stopped in the middle of a bite of an apple one of the guards gave her. "I don't know why," she thought, "but for some reason, I have the strangest feeling somebody succeeded where I couldn't at something. Something involving blood eyes." She pondered it for a moment more, before shrugging and finishing her apple. Location: wherever the heck Luffy and Von are. "But you just said you ate blood," Luffy argued. "I ate a blood fruit. That's not the same thing," Von argued back. "But did it taste like blood? It was a devil fruit, it tasted rotten?" "Rotten and bloody? Arg, sanguine needles?" Luffy jumped away, and just in time too. The spikes returned, and judging by their crisscrossed position, Von had been aiming to give Luffy several extra nostrils, if you catch my drift. Vaughn stuck out his palm, and the spikes and any remaining blood on the ground gathered into it, forming a swirling elongated shape. It looked similar to a long javelin. Sanguine harpoon, he shouted, throwing the javelin or harpoon, actually. Luffy, once again standing, stuck out his hand to catch the harpoon. Yeah, it was kind of gross, but he could deal with it. However, as soon as the harpoon got close to his hand, it turned back into liquid and split in half. Maneuvering around the young him, it reformed back into a harpoon, and before Luffy could get away, it pierced his side. Luffy bit back a groan. No, he was not going to fall over. He refused to fall again and give this guy an edge. Vaughn ran a hand through his uneven hair, looking much calmer than he did before. I have to commend you, Straw Hat. It's been a long time since anyone's gotten a rise out of me like that. He glanced Luffy's new side wound with distaste. And here I was trying not to grievously injure you. You really know how to throw a monkey wrench in my plans, don't you? Suddenly, several explosion sounds echoed through the woods, and several trees fell over in the distance. Oh, sounds like Erides pissed off, Vaughn commented as he turned to look. He shook his head. She should really be less impulsive. These trees are so big that if you knock one down, you'll take the whole forest with you. He cocked his head to left, agilely avoiding a gum-gum pistol. He turned to look at Luffy, who looked pretty pissed himself. Oh yeah, you're still here. He snapped his fingers and the harpoon in Luffy melted. Luffy staggered briefly, but as he promised himself, he stayed upright. It's only fair to warn you that fighting me involves a secondary health risk, Vaughn said. If my blood weapons are in your body when they return to liquid form, you run the risk of getting blood poisoning. Just thought you'd like to know. Luffy simply gave Vaughn a dark, intense glare. It actually made Vaughn a little uncomfortable. He'd heard this kid displayed Conqueror's Haki during the Battle of Marineford through an old contact, and now he could definitely see the pirate having it. All this because I tried to kill one of your little friends, huh? Vaughn shrugged. I can respect that, but you're out of your league. I can tell this is early days for you. You aren't ready to take on a new world bounty hunter. Are you here to talk, or are you here to collect my bounty? Luffy snarled. And don't you dare talk so offhandedly about my nakama. Vaughn shrugged again and picked up his rifle. Fine, can't say I didn't try. You ready? Luffy gave a loud battle cry, and the two men ran at each other, prepped to begin their duel anew. Runo loved his new toys. He'd had some favorites in the past, but these new ones really took the cake. One was strong, one was adorable, and the last one was smoking hot. Unfortunately, Yari claimed the smoking hot one as one of her dolls for later. Poor thing. He stroked the top of the adorable one's, he'd come to call it Fluffy McFluffmeister, head. Fluffy was the only one with him at the moment. The other two, as far as he could sense, were somewhere in the direction Yari had gone in. One factor of his powers was he could always sense where his Vic toys were. Runo leaned back against the tree trunk and hugged Fluffy close. Using his hypno powers for this reason was actually more efficient than using his Haki to keep tabs on his toys. This fact seriously irked and disturbed him. Ever since they landed on this freakish island, it felt like everything had been muted. Yari had claimed to be having the same problems once they arrived, and announced it openly after those freaking plants caught them for the third time. Vaughn was probably having the same issues, not that the bloody vamp would tell anyone. That guy gave him the creeps. Pot and kettle, Runo, Vaughn's sarcastic voice echoed in his head. Great, now he was hearing the bloodsucker's voice in his head. He'd fit right in with all the others he heard. Back to the muting Haki issue. Besides getting a general feeling that there was currently a good number of people on the island at the moment, he couldn't pinpoint anyone's specific inner voice unless they were ridiculously close. Nami, where are you, stupid cook? Idiot's tougher than he looks, I should probably end it. He hurt Zoro, he hurt, with a spoon, sniper. Like now, actually. What a coincidence. Runo grinned his slasher grin, as Arati had dubbed it, and looked down at Fluffy McFluffmeister. What do you say, Fluffy? He asked his little toy. You want to have a go at the targets while I go find Yari? Fluffy just stared blankly up at him. Runo decided to take that as a yes. Location: Carrion Bounty Hunter Base Camp. The ship's been what? Carrion shouted into the transponder snail's receiver. It is as I said, sir, Yari replied. the snail mirroring what was undoubtedly her somewhat annoyed expression. The silverback has been completely destroyed, and all of our men that were aboard have been defeated. Carrion exhaled loudly through his nose. How, pray tell, did this happen? I am not claiming to know anything about ships or the infidels you insist upon hiring, but both parties appear to have been cut up by a sword. Mahawk didn't show up on this island when we weren't looking, did he? If I recall correctly, he has a habit of cutting up galleons whenever he's bored. I sincerely doubt it, boss. Carrion frowned. Then it must have been the Straw Hat Pirates. I'd heard a rumor about the pirate hunter cutting apart a pirate's galleon on Sabaody Archipelago. That does not surprise me, Yari said with disgust. I hate to admit it, but if Vaughn had not interrupted our duel, I might have lost my life. Roronoa is a monster of a swordsman. It's a shame he gave up bounty hunting to become a pirate. He'd make an excellent replacement swordsman for you, Yari. Was that really necessary? She paused. What I am saying, of course it was. This is you were talking about. Whatever. Back on topic, you do not sound all that upset about losing the ship. We will not be able to leave the island now. You just let me worry about that, Yari, Carrion said in a cool tone. I have a plan for every contingency after all. Now, if that's all you have to report, continue your search for the treasure and the Straw Hats. I do believe that along with their generous bounties, they have a perfectly good ship to donate. Ooh, devious, Yari cooed appreciatively. I knew there was a reason I followed you. You mean besides the size of your paycheck? But of course. Goodbye. Click. Carrion replaced the receiver and glanced around the walls of his tent. Yes, he was paying these imbecilic bounty hunters a hefty sum for their services, and they had yet to deliver anything substantial, at least on the island. How long had they been searching? A day? Less than that. The constant changes in the sunrises and sunsets made determining the passage of time difficult. Whatever the case may be, they were no closer to capturing the Straw Hats and Kala's treasure than they were when they first weighed anchor. An anchor they no longer had, he thought bitterly, and they had just replaced the chains too. Oddly enough, the only one who had made any progress was Runo, and that was a rare sight indeed. He'd captured 3 Straw Hats and had personally rubbed it in the others' faces when he returned to camp that time. Sure, Arati and Vaughn had returned with Siobhan, but the little brat was still refusing to cooperate. Carrion snarled. He honestly didn't want to kill her, but she was so infuriating that he desired to slit her skinny little throat. Wait, he was contradicting himself again, wasn't he? He needed to work on that. Constantly contradicting oneself made one look like a fool. Not to say he didn't find this contradiction justified. The brat knew more than she let on and made a game of not telling him a solitary thing. He recalled the brief conversation he had with her right after Vaughn had taken off with Runo and Runo's toys. Holler if you need me, boss, his subordinate said, opening the tent flap. Are you insinuating that I can't handle a 10-year-old girl? Carrion asked, raising an eyebrow. Didn't Mr. Vaughn and M's Arati have to pull her off you after she bit you 5 times? Just leave. The lackey shrugged and did so. Once he was gone, Carrion turned back to the little brat herself. She was standing up and leaning against the back of her cage, crossing her arms and looking bored. They stared at each other for a few minutes, glaring bitterly at one another. 12, Siobhan said at last. It took a second for Carrion to register that she had spoken at all. I beg your pardon? I'm 12. You told your minion you could handle a 10-year-old girl, and I'm telling you I'm 12. That's hardly relevant to the current matter at hand. Siobhan smirked. What matter is there? All you did was come in here and stare at me for 2 minutes. You haven't brought up any matter whatsoever. I think we both know what that matter I have yet to bring up is, Carrion said, smirking back. Ah yes, that treasure you're so obsessed with, Siobhan stated, sitting down with her legs crossed. I won't deny its existence, but what makes you think I know where it is? Call it a hunch, my dear. Now, if you decide to cease being difficult and tell me what I wish to know, I will set you free, he offered. Didn't you say you were planning on killing me even if I did tell you? I apologize, I did not truly mean that. I was simply caught up in the moment. Sure. You can just screw yourself. I don't know where it is, so I guess you'll just have to search this island for the next 100 years. Not to say you'll ever find it. Carrion was seriously contemplating taking her out of the cage just so he could beat her smug face in. However, he swallowed the urge given that was probably what the little wench wanted. The leaving the cage part, anyway. Instead, he smiled gently. "You're the guardian of this island's treasure, are you not?" Carrion asked, managing to sound polite. "If I took it off your hands and left its protection to the world government, you could finally leave this place. You could find a new home and wouldn't have to be all alone on this small island. Isn't that you want? Isn't that what every lonely person wants?" Siobhan kept her expression blank, but her golden eyes sparked with fury. Carrion found it to be quite unsettling. That glare alone seemed to make the air itself go stagnant. "Don't you think for a second that you know what I want, Carrion," she said in a monotonous voice. "True, being alone on this and again, but I'd rather end up a festering corpse on this rock than see you or your world government get what they want." Carrion swallowed, although his mouth was so dry nothing went down. How could such a young child have such a commandeering presence? Not wanting her to see his weakness, he turned to leave the tent. "Oi, hold on." Carrion stopped walking but did not turn to face her. "I don't know what you think the treasure is, but consider this," Siobhan said with caution. "Somebody went to a lot of trouble to seal it away on a time-traveling, space-crossing island. Ever wonder why?" Carrion sunk into his tense armchair and chuckled darkly. He had wondered why, in the distant past at least. That was before he learned exactly what the treasure was. It would not only be his ticket to being reinstated into the Marines. It would also bring about the end of the accursed new pirate age that Whitebeard started. Maybe he would let the girl live after all, to see him unleash it if nothing else. That would wipe the smug look off her face for sure. Location. Who even knows at this point? "What do you mean? What's a climatak and what's a pop green?" Usopp hollered. "Exactly what it sounds like," Nami hollered right back. Nami couldn't believe the sight before here. She knew her crew would be different after 2 years, but this was really pushing it. Usopp was supposed to be a weak, spineless coward who came through for his friends at the right moments. This Usopp. Well, he was probably still a coward given how much he was sweating, but he'd succeeded in hurting Arati when she couldn't. He certainly didn't look weak, what with all those new muscles and that strange ammunition. And what was with that slingshot? It kind of reminded her of a stag beetle's horn, but only vaguely. "Oh no, it's worse than I thought," Usopp said with dread. "Somehow being captured by that freakish ragdoll man has erased your memories. Dang it, this is just like the incident with the seahorse all over again." Nami clocked him on the head. "Ow, you blockhead, I don't have amnesia. And what's this about a seahorse?" "Never mind the seahorse. If you don't have amnesia, then why don't you know what your own weapon is?" He suddenly looked wary. "You're not an imposter, are you?" "What? No, of course not," Nami yelled. "Prove it. What was the name of the fish man I defeated on your home island?" "Chew, from whom did we receive the going merry?" "Kaya on Gecko Island." "What creature dwells at the bottom of Reverse Mountain?" "Laboon the island whale." Usopp stared skeptically at her for a few moments, and Nami prayed to whatever deity that was listening that he believed her. That last thing she needed was misunderstanding of this nature to add to her already full plate. "Okay, you're Nami," he decided at last, satisfied. "Now, I repeat, if you don't have amnesia, then what's wrong with you?" To make an extremely long story short, I'm not your Nami. In actuality, I'm a Nami from 2 years in your past. Nami rattled off quickly. "We arrived at this island a little while after your crew did despite the fact we were in paradise at the time. We've already found your Zoro and your skeleton musician. Me, future Zoro, Sanji, and Chopper came into the jungle to find Luffy after he charged in here like an idiot in order to find you, got it?" Usopp stared at her blankly as her words sunk in. After a couple seconds, he gave her his response to all that. "Are you lying? You're one to be asking that?" Nami mentally despaired. It was a dark day indeed if she was being accused of lying by Usopp of all people. Then again, her story did sound quite unbelievable, even by his standards. "Seriously, Nami?" Usopp crossed his arms. "I'm the Straw Hat Pirates' #1 liar. And even I wouldn't tell that one." He thought for a moment. "Then again, you wouldn't tell such a ridiculous lie in such a serious situation. Maybe you got a head injury. Arati didn't give you a concussion before I showed up, did she?" Nami frowned. "Who the heck is Arati? That bounty hunter with the mohawk we were just trying to run away from." "You're on a first-name basis with her?" Usopp. Shut up. I've been following her and her creepy cohorts around for the past day. I just happened to pick up her name during that time. Why were you following a sadistic bounty hunter around when you could have been trying to find your crew? What do you think I was trying to accomplish by following them around? They captured our friends. I'm not stupid enough to go after them alone. So I was trying to hinder their plans in any way I could. Only then that CP9 wannabe found me and shot my plans to hell. Nami was about to retort, when something about his words registered with her. Our friends were captured? Was I one of them? You were, and now your sudden appearance here is starting to make sense. Both pirates froze. Usopp hadn't been the one who had spoken. They slowly turned their heads to the side, and not surprisingly, there stood Arati. She didn't look any less angry or unlikely to deprive Usopp of his manhood, but her expression was also oddly contemplative. I thought it was weird you looked so different than when I last saw you, Arati noted. Your hair and your height, for example. Not to mention those meat sacks you call aren't nearly as grossly swollen. Hey, Nami protested indignantly. But if what you just told Sniper King is true, then it all makes sense, the bounty hunter went on. That's why you did so pitifully back during our fight, if that's what you want to call it. You're a younger version of Cat Burglar, therefore inexperienced. You haven't learned any of the abilities that make you so formidable in my time. What? Usopp gasped. He turned to Nami. So you really are from 2 years in the past? Why is it that you believe her right off the bat and not me? Nami hollered, whacking him upside the head. Ow, can you blame me? You didn't explain it very well and I thought you were concussed? Arg, you are such an idiot, ow, stop hitting me, Nami. Arati watched the argument and sweat dropped. She was half tempted to let them fight it out themselves, until she remembered everything that long-nosed nuisance put her through. Kal is truly a mysterious place, if it's capable of bringing straw hats of 2 different times together. Arati broke in, interrupting the bickering pair. Personally, I don't really care about any of that. It all comes down to the fact that young or not, you're still Cat Burglar Nami. I can turn in your and Longnose's bounties just as easily either way. Nami and Usopp took a few nervous steps back. The grin Arati gave them resembled an angry cat that was just 2 steps away from catching a very persistent and annoying mouse. So, who's going to be stupid enough to attack me first? Arati asked, taking a stance. Nami shoved Usopp forward. He is. I was hoping it would be, Arati admitted chipperly. Usopp whirled around and gave his comrade look. Nami, what the heck? You completely just threw me under the boat, asterisk asterisk. I'm sorry Usopp, but I'm not qualified to take on a new world bounty hunter, Nami explained. As of right now, you're the strongest straw hat here, so make her beg for mercy. I'm the strongest straw hat here? Usopp repeated. Realization dawned upon him. I'm the strongest straw hat here. Realization melted away into solid deadpan. Wow. This is kind of bittersweet. Less complaining, more bringing on the hurt, Nami ordered. Right. Usopp drew back his slingshot and fired, Phoenix Star. A burst of flame in the shape of a bird surged towards the mohawked woman, but this time she was ready. She flash-stepped out of the path of the phoenix and reappeared in front of Usopp before he could evade her. Shigen, Arati jabbed her finger into Usopp's shoulder, and it went in as if she had stuck it into butter instead of human flesh. Blood spurted out and Usopp reeled backward as he cried out in pain. The gauntlets make it hurt so much more than no, Arati sneered. She stuck out her right arm and spread out her fingers. Go Shigen, flying stinger. From the claws of the gauntlet came 5 sharp bursts of air, striking Usopp's right arm like gunfire before the sniper could recover from the previous hit. More blood spurted out as Usopp gave an agonized shout and fell to the jungle floor. Usopp, Nami yelled out worriedly. She ran over to him and sat him up. Are you okay? Aside from the obvious, I mean. Usopp grunted and gripped his shoulder. Damn it, she's smart. What makes you say that? I need both arms to shoot a slingshot. Nami paled and glanced at his wounded arm. That arm wasn't going to be so much as lifting a fork, let alone pull back the strap of a slingshot, anytime soon. Guess we now know why she wears the gauntlets, though, Usopp went on as Nami helped him stand up. Like it? Arati asked casually, holding one of her armored arms up. Got the idea from watching that pigeon freak back during training. Claws really open a lot doors when you're trying to kill someone. Nami had idea what she said did it, but suddenly Usopp looked like he'd been electrocuted. Pigeon. Freak. He repeated slowly. I assume you know who I'm talking about, Arati continued, walking towards the pair. My associates told me you even went as far as to challenge him on the Bridge of Hesitation. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, but taking what I know of you, I'm going with the latter. She had reached the pair. She kicked Nami aside and roughly pinned Usopp against the bottom of one of the ginormous trees. I mean, the only reason you survived this long was because you kept running away instead of facing me at close quarters, and also by catching me off guard. Arati squeezed Usopp's wounded shoulder, making him grunt. You got some guts, but at your core, you're just another coward. What a disappointment. Why Straw Hat would let such a letdown onto his crew is beyond me. I mean, I still can't believe this sniper is really part of the crew he fought so hard for, the bounty hunter thought to herself. I just don't get it. You shut up. Arati turned her head to the side. Nami was back her feet, shaking but firm. She looked downright murderous. Usopp is not a letdown. Nami seethed, holding her still bruised stomach. My times Usopp always comes through in the end, and I know that much won't change 2 years from now. He would never do anything to hurt this crew or disappoint us. He's going to be a brave warrior of the sea, so shut your stupid complaining mouth. Arati raised an eyebrow. Those are just pretty words, girly, if I don't see actions to back them up. You just stay there while I break your friend's nose. Shouldn't take too long. She turned her head back to Usopp, only instead being nose to nose with him. She was now staring straight at Shell with little holes in its surface. Oh, for the love of, she began. Impact, Usopp called out. Tekai. The red-haired navigator didn't know what she had just seen. It was as if some concussive force had exploded from the shell and sent Arati flying backward 20 feet into a massive tree. This time, she didn't get back up. Usopp slid to the ground and landed on his feet, staggering. Nami was over at his side to steady him almost immediately. Good thing I've beefed up some, Usopp commented tiredly, holding the shell up. If I had done that 2 years ago, I would have dislocated my shoulder. That was amazing. You actually beat her, Nami gasped. She frowned. Why didn't you do that earlier? I wasn't close enough, he replied simply. And of course I beat her, I'm the great Pop Green's master Usopp. I couldn't call myself a straw hat if I couldn't do something so simple. Nami gave him a knowing smile. Then why are your knees shaking? Usopp looked down and sure enough, his knees were knocking together at a rapid rate. Shut up. I've been running from her all morning and I'm tired. It's not because I thought she was going to kill me just now. Sure it's not. Nami chuckled. Glad to see some things stay the same over the years. I bet. I still can't believe you're a younger Nami, Usopp said. How far back are you from? Chopper joined our crew just a few days ago. Seriously? That far? I'm afraid so. I'll give you better details when we meet back up with your times Zoro and my times Chopper and Sanji. And I'll want to know everything that's happened to you. Seeing Chopper sounds really good to me right about now, Usopp groaned. He perked up. Oh hey, does this mean Vivi's with you? She is, Nami answered. Aw man, I've missed her so much. It'll be great to see her again. He lost some of his perkiness. Nami, did you really mean what said back there? About how I would never do anything to hurt or disappoint the crew? If I didn't meant it I wouldn't have said it, dummy, Nami scolded him lightly, putting his good arm over her shoulders for support. Usopp grimaced, as if remembering something painful. Usopp, is there something wrong? The navigator inquired. No, there's nothing wrong, the sniper replied quickly. He shifted his weight so Nami wasn't carrying it all herself. Come on, let's get out of here before that psycho wakes up. I doubt she'll fall for the same trick twice. Okay. I'll try to lead us back to my group. Hopefully they've found Luffy and we'll have more manpower for when she does wake up and tries to break your nose and or castrate you again. Don't remind me. Nami chuckled and the pair started moving in the opposite direction of Arati. They had only gone a few feet when they heard clapping. Not fast, laudatory clapping, but the slow kind people only do when they're being sarcastic. Bravo, a male voice said. I have to say, for being one of the weakest members of the crew, you did remarkably well, Sniper Kane. The voice's owner stepped out of the wall of vines and shrubbery that was in front of Nami and Usopp. It was a young man with black hair and red eyes. He had a rifle strapped to his back and 2 holstered pistols, but what really concerned them was the long broadsword balanced in the crook of his elbow. It looked as if it were forged from some kind of red crystal. There was something on the ground behind him. He had probably been dragging it behind him before he stopped to clap. "Who are you?" Nami demanded. She turned her Usopp. "Is he one of the bounty hunters?" "I am," the man responded before Usopp could. He shifted the sword back into his hand. "My name's Vaughn. As I was saying, getting one over on Arati is no small feat. Color me impressed." "You should be," Usopp boasted, looking braver than he felt right now. "I beat her, so don't think I can't beat you too." Vaughn smirked. "I said you got one over on her. I never said you beat her." He looked past the pirate pair. "Oi, Arati, how much longer are you going to play possum?" Nami and Usopp's eyes widened as they turned to check on the mohawked woman. As they did, they got twin punches to their faces, sending them crashing to the ground in front of Vaughn. "I'm done now," Arati said coolly, straightening out and placing her hands on her hips. "And please don't mention possums. They remind me too much of that annoying Zone we turned in last month. Remember him?" "I do. He was annoying," Vaughn noted. He glanced down at the pirates. They weren't unconscious, just stunned. With a sweat drop he asked, "Did you have to punch them while still wearing the gauntlets?" "Yeah, did you?" Nami croaked, holding her bruised cheek. "Put a cork it, both of you," Arati snapped. They had it coming. That sniper hit me in the face with an impact dial. "Oh, that explains why your nose is bleeding," the red-eyed man said cordially. Arati removed a gauntlet and wiped her nose. "I got my iron body up in time, which is why my face isn't a mural of smashed bones and cartilage right now. I'm thankful a bloody nose is all I have to worry about." She glanced at Vaughn. "You seem to be sporting more than a S yourself. You and Runo have a run-in with somebody?" "Runo ran off on his own a while ago. I did, however, have a run-in with somebody, as you so eloquently put it." He reached down and lifted up what he had been dragging. "See for yourself." At the sight of his cargo, Arati, Nami, and Usopp's eyes all widened. The first's eyes widened in surprise. The latter two's eyes did so in horror. Location: wherever the heck it is. Roronoa, Sanji, and Chopper are at this point. "What the heck are you doing, Mosshead?" Sanji hollered up to the future swordsman. "Looking for Nami. What does it look like?" Roronoa hollered back. "By climbing a tree? You said go north, so I climbed the tallest thing here." "North and up aren't the same thing." Chopper sweat dropped. "Come on, guys. We need to find Nami." After watching Sanji panic and run around in circles about losing his precious Nami swan for a few minutes, Roronoa had tripped him and told him to get a hold of himself. Once Chopper gave the cook an ice pack, they sat down to figure out what their next course of action would be. Chopper suggested that since Nami had been taking them north, she might try to keep going in that direction. By that logic, they might find her if they kept heading north. Sanji and Roronoa readily agreed, seeing as neither of them had any better ideas. "Which brings them to right now. Just get down from there, you ninny," Sanji ordered. "Don't tell me what to do, number 7, Roronoa argued. "What does that even mean? Wouldn't you like to know?" "Roronoa, Sanji, maybe you two should stop yelling," Chopper said timidly. "You might attract the wrong kind of attention, like more bounty hunters." "Or maybe Nami and Luffy will hear us and come running," Sanji suggested half seriously. He took out a fresh cigarette and lit it, muttering, "Damn Mosshead. Heaven forbid he actually learned the cardinal directions after 2 crappy years." Chopper looked up at the cook curiously. "Sanji, why to dislike Roronoa so much?" "He's Mosshead, ain't he?" "No, I mean you seem to dislike him more than you dislike our Zoro. Is it because he beat you back on the Mary?" Sanji took a drag and thought that one over. He was sure his beating, fine, he admitted it, was part of the reason. The other part though. The two search groups split up. As Sanji's group headed for the jungle and Zoro's headed back to the Mary, the green-haired swordsman made a point of walking past the cook. "Watch him," he whispered. He said it in such a quiet voice that Sanji almost missed it. He didn't miss it, however, and gave a brief nod in response. Sanji didn't like a lot of things about Zoro, but he couldn't deny that man's instincts were usually right. If he thought there was a reason not to trust Roronoa, chances were that there was something not to trust. Though, the chef found his new task rather difficult. Like Luffy had said earlier, Roronoa was still Nakama, past or future. Not trusting a member of his own crew left a sour taste in his mouth. And as a chef, he usually appreciated the occasional, subtle sour taste. But not this time. Yes, despite popular belief, he did trust Zoro. They were in the same crew, how could he not? Yeah, sure, that's the reason, Sanji told Chopper. Bigger idiot Mosshead's too cocky for his own good. Oh, alright. That seemed to satisfy the little reindeer. Hey, actually, why do you dislike Zoro in general? I've been wondering that. Geez, why did the doctor have to keep asking the difficult questions? Sanji sighed. It's kind of complicated, you see. Cook, Chopper, heads up. It took 1 second for the aforementioned pirates to turn. It another second for the elder swordsman to jump down from his perch and deflect the attack with Shisui. Said attack appeared to be a glowing slash of air. Once Shisui diverted its path, it went straight into the tree branch Roronoa had previously been standing on. The branch fell to the ground, looking like it had been cut. Sanji gaped, looking from Roronoa to the branch. He turned to Chopper. Please tell me Roronoa didn't just save me. But he did save you, Chopper said, confused. Roronoa ignored the other two, glaring up into the tree adjacent from the one he had been standing in. Am I correct in assuming you're the source of all these tempest kicks? He called up. Chopper and Sanji looked up as well, and were shocked to see two people standing in its branches, a man and a woman. You assume correct, Roronoa. The woman called back. I'm impressed you were able to deflect it so easily. Then again, I'm told you were the one who beat Kaku, so I shouldn't be too amazed. Roronoa's eye narrowed ever so slightly at the name Kaku. Chopper looked at Sanji for an explanation, but the blonde shrugged. Oi, pirate hunter, the man called down. He had a crystalline red sword tucked through his belt. Remember me? Roronoa grit his teeth. You're the red-eyed freak who tranquilized me. They're the bounty hunters? Chopper gasped. Oh no. How the hell did you find us? Sanji asked. Arati and Vaughn gave them deadpan looks and said in unison, we heard you yelling like a bunch of idiots. Sanji looked down at Chopper. Not a word out of you. Roronoa studied the two bounty hunters up above him. They were too relaxed for people who knew there was a prospect for a fight. They knew something the Straw Hats didn't. He glanced at Vaughn's sword. Hey, red-eyed freak. You're a sniper and a swordsman? My name is Vaughn, and yeah, I am, he answered. I find it useful to have more than one skill set here on the vast Grand Line. Why, you want to fight? The green-haired swordsman smirked and brandished his sword. I do owe you for tranking me. Oh yeah, that. I'm still trying to figure out why you didn't die. That amount of tranquilizer would have dropped an elephant. Vaughn shrugged. I'll fight you, but you better have improved from the last time I saw you fight. Otherwise you'll bore me. How could I have improved over the course of a day? Roronoa deadpanned. What, you think I mean when you fought Yari? That hardly counts. The last time I saw you really fight was 2 years ago. The red-eyed man smiled darkly. On Saboti Archipelago. The smirk on Zoro's face melted into a hateful snarl. Sanji flinched when he saw it. True, the smug, condescending way Vaughn had said that made him feel angry too, but the look on the swordsman's face gave him chills. I watched from behind one of the mangroves. It was good effort, but I felt your performance faltered a little bit at the end there, Vaughn went on. Not that I stuck around for the whole thing. I hit the road after Dark King stopped old man Kizaru from blowing off your head. Though with your ugly mug, that might have been an improvement. You bastard. Roronoa cursed. Why do people always call me that? My parents were happily married long before I was born. Don't take the fact that you're a weakling out on me. Get down here so I can gut you. You? Okay. Both you shut up. Sanji broke in. Clearly, there are some unresolved issues here. But since this is obviously a future thing, I don't want to know about it. What I do want to know are the whereabouts of the older Nami and Usopp. He looked up at the bounty hunters. We know you did something to them, and you're going to tell us what. And if we decide not to? Arati asked, placing a manicured hand on her chin. I would hate to have rough up such a lovely lady, but if it's for my nakama, I will do what's necessary, Sanji said suavely, bowing slightly and placing his hand on his chest. Sanji, Chopper said in awe, that was so cool. Sanji smiled. Of course it was. He was way cooler than that swordsman. Roronoa didn't seem to hear Sanji or Chopper. He was too busy glaring angrily at Vaughn. Arati raised an eyebrow and gave Sanji a slightly confused look. Lovely lady? That's different tune than from what you were singing earlier. She narrowed her eyes, as if studying Sanji more closely. Oh, wait, hold on, you're the use more sense. Nonetheless, I'd think twice about threatening us if I were you. Sanji was about to retort, but Roronoa barred him back with his arm. And why's that? Arati swept out her arm grandly. Vaughn, show them what's behind figurative door number 1. Vaughn nodded and thrust his hand out. When he did, what appeared to be 2 bodies shot out of the branches. It wasn't just any 2 bodies, it was Nami and future Usopp. They hung in the air, their bodies clenched and stiff-looking. Veins throbbed visibly against their skin, and both looked to be in pain. Thankfully they appeared to be conscious. Nami! Sanji cried out. Sanji, Nami choked out. He saw her multiple and many bruises. He seethed. Those crappy hunters had hurt his precious Nami, they would pay. Who's that with her? Chopper asked. He kinda looks like. It's Usopp, Roronoa finished for the reindeer. He looked truly and utterly pissed. My time's Usopp. That's Usopp? Sanji asked in disbelief. The cook and the reindeer stared at the sniper for several moments in sheer awe. The sniper looked down at them, eyes looking at them expectantly. Future Usopp's all manly, the duo shouted incredulously. Roronoa face palmed. Why is that so shocking? Usopp shouted, his teeth looking comedically shark-like. He looked down at Roronoa. Zoro, be careful with these 2. Vaughn can control blood and I think Arati might be an ex-CP9. CP9? Roronoa repeated. He frowned. That would explain how she knows Kaku. You're from CP9? Vaughn asked his companion. I recognized the fighting style but I never thought you were from them. Technically, I was never part of the official team. You see, Arati began to explain before apparently changing her mind. Never mind. It's a long story and not one I can tell sober. Converse on your own time. Roronoa broke in. I don't care what abilities you have or if you're from some defunct Black Ops unit. I don't take kindly to a bunch of jackass bounty hunters hurting my crewmates. You're both going down and you're going down hard. I will fight you both if I have to. Hey, what about us? Sanji argued, hands in his pockets and tapping the toe of his shoe against the ground. I'm not letting you play white knight to Nami's damsel in distress. They're too strong for you and Chopper, Roronoa retorted. Besides, you couldn't kick a woman to literally save your life. Chopper wilted at this news. He'd been hoping he could fight for his crew this time. But wait, there's more, Vaughn said, sounding like a game show host. If you decide to fight the first and second lieutenants of the Carrion bounty hunters, not only do you get the chance to free a navigator and a sniper, but you also get. He thrust out his other hand, and another body burst from the tree's branches. This one made every present non-captive Straw Hat's blood run cold. Luffy. The rubber captain looked terrible. He was covered in dried blood and he had. Were those gunshot wounds? Luffy couldn't be shot. He also had cuts, which made a little more sense, but those bruises he had sure didn't. And to make matters worse, he too hung stiff in the air, but he wasn't conscious. Vaughn haughtily removed Luffy's hat and placed it on his own head. Had to say, for a near rookie, he didn't do too bad. How'd you beat him anyway? Arati asked. Past or future, Straw Hat is still a tough one. That's a trade secret. You got bored and knocked him out by making the blood rush to his head cause you didn't bring trank darts, didn't you? You know Arati, if you were a pirate captain, you'd be named Captain Killjoy. The pirates ignored the bounty hunters. Roronoa looked ready to kill something, preferably said bounty hunters, while Chopper and Sanji looked on in astonishment. Had Luffy been defeated so easily? They knew these New World guys would be tough, but to make their near unbeatable captain appear so helpless. Hello? Vaughn called down, making the 3 captive pirate wiggle in the air. You guys still with us? Stop that! Sanji yelled, hoping he didn't sound desperate. You sick piece of crap. Let them all go, now. Okay. Vaughn agreed chipperly. The 3 straw hats below went blue in the face. He wasn't going to actually. Vaughn raised his arms up and, before anyone could stop him, namely Arati, thrust them down. Instantly, the captive straw hats stopped floating and fell towards the jungle floor. Nami and Usopp screamed, and Luffy was still unconscious and most likely had no idea as to what was happening. Lucky for them, their nakama were quick. Roronoa and Sanji both jumped into the air and caught Luffy and Nami respectively before they could hit the ground. Chopper went heavy point and caught Usopp. Whoa, nice reflexes. Vaughn complimented. He turned to Arati. Hey, you see that? That was? Arati punched him the face and sent him tumbling out the tree. Moron. The straw hats that were all conscious shivered at Arati's heartless action. She's a demon. As Arati jumped to the ground, Vaughn jumped to his feet and held his cheek. What the heck, Arati? How could you just toss our hostages over to them? Arati shrieked. That's against the point of taking hostages in the first place. What do you want me to do? I was getting tired from using my powers all dramatically like that, which, might I remind you, was your idea. So I don't need some old hag nagging me. Old hag? Old hag? Arati was on the verge of going into hysterics. Listen here, Enoch, I'm 29. That's only 3 years older than you. I am not old. Vaughn crossed his arms. I'm 27, Arati. If you were really 3 years older than me, that would make you. Don't say it, make you. Don't freaking say it. 30. That did it. Arati punched him into the ground again, only this time she wore her gauntlets. There might have been a little Tekai in there as well. I'm still 29, damn it. While the bounty hunters worked out their issues, the straw hats tended to their own. Chopper laid Usopp against a tree, and Roronoa knelt next to him, not relinquishing his hold on Luffy however. Sanji was also perfectly happy carrying Nami bridal style and made no effort to set her down. Nami, are you okay? Sanji asked softly. Those bruises. I'm fine, worry about Luffy and Usopp, Nami insisted, letting herself down. Chopper began examining the two of them. Oh no, they're both seriously wounded. We need a doctor. Is anyone a doctor? You're the doctor, Chopper, Roronoa scolded him. They had no time for childish antics. Chopper stopped freaking out. Alright. Sorry. I'll be okay, Chopper, Usopp said. Focus on Luffy. He looks worse off than I do. Roronoa finally set Luffy against the tree trunk so Chopper could do his job, then moved in front of Usopp. Usopp, did Nami fill you in? He asked. Briefly, the sniper responded. He clutched his arm. Roronoa glanced at the wounds. You get those protecting Nami? Yup, Usopp replied tersely. Roronoa smiled. Good man. We're nakama, Usopp shrugged. As if that answered everything, then winced in pain. He looked toward Chopper and Luffy. How's Luffy? Chopper lifted his head up, his eyes tearing up. It's bad. He's lost a lot of blood. He needs a transfusion but I don't. Before the little doctor could continue, something bizarre occurred. Floating ribbons of red liquid streamed through air and entered Luffy's wounds. This made Luffy grunt in his unconsciousness, but did not wake him. When they all looked to see where it was coming from, they saw it was coming from a no longer being punched Vaughn. More specifically, it was coming from his now liquefied sword. Once the red liquid, what they realized was blood, finished entering Luffy, all the wounds scabbed over. The pirates stared at the bounty hunter. Sorry, Vaughn apologized. I forgot to give that back to him after our fight. I hope you'll forgive my negligence. He glanced at his now empty hand, then smacked his forehead in a dough manner. Don't have a sword. I guess I'm going to have to take a rain check on our duel, pirate hunter. You're a terrible actor, Arati muttered, crossing her arms and rolling her eyes. I hope you realize this will be a whole lot harder now that we've lost our hostages. Have you no faith in your own abilities, Arati? Vaughn asked. She rolled her eyes again. You better hope the boss doesn't find out you messed up so bad. Roronoa stood up and held up Shisui. What are you playing at, Vaughn? Last time I checked, bounty hunters don't help or release their targets. And you would know that, being a former bounty hunter and all, Vaughn agreed. I'd love to sit down and have some witty pre-battle banter about this, but At the exact moment Vaughn paused in his speech, a strange sound echoed through the jungle. It sounded like some kind of roar, and a pained one at that. It made those who heard it break out into a cold sweat. "I'm afraid this is where we make our exit," Vaughn finished, tossing Luffy's hat to the swordsman. With that, he snatched Eridy's hand and went charging into the jungle, the mohawked woman protesting and cursing the entire way. This left the Straw Hats to wonder what the heck just happened. However, they didn't have long to muse over it. Not long after that roar sounded, the ground began to shake at even intervals, in unison with loud thumping noises. It was almost as if they were footsteps. Nami thought aloud. What could make footsteps that big? Sanji wondered. Giants. All of a sudden, Roronoa stood ramrod straight, as if a charge had gone his spine, and broke out into a sweat. No, this feeling. Zoro? Usopp spoke up, pulling himself into a standing position. Care to share with the class? Roronoa didn't answer. He was now staring at Chopper. Chopper shifted uncomfortably. Roronoa? Is there something R-O-A-R? The Straw Hats held their ears as the roar resounded through the trees. It was the most horrible thing the younger pirates had ever heard. The elder pirates, on the other hand. That roar. Usopp muttered. He turned sharply to Roronoa. You don't think it's... Roronoa reached down and lifted Luffy up, placing the straw hat back on his captain's crown. It is. The sniper grimaced. That's never good. He never goes for the big guns unless the situation really demands it. Before any of the others could ask what those two meant, the roar finished and its owner broke through the trees. Sanji, Nami, and Chopper stepped back in abject terror. This was... It was a giant, furry creature with hooves, massive arms, and long, black fingers. Its solid white eyes were icy and cloudy, and its giant antlers looked as if they could pierce anything. And for some strange reason, it wore shorts and blue hat that would have been cute in any other instance, but not this one. The monster let out a long, slow breath, and stared down at them with its blank, cold gaze. What is that? Nami stuttered. That, Roronoa said in deadpan, would be our doctor. What? R-O-A-R. The pirates had to cover their ears again. Except Roronoa, who was too busy holding Luffy. Hold on, Sanji yelled over the noise. How can that thing be Chopper? I've seen nearly all of his transformations and he's never turned into that. Sanji looked down at the doctor. Chopper, what? He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Chopper's face. The poor thing had a horrified, awestruck expression on his face and was shaking so badly you'd think he was having a seizure. It was as if he couldn't comprehend the beast before him could even exist. That FF form. Chopper stuttered. I ate 3 rumble balls, and then lost consciousness. What happened? Chopper asked weakly. I suppose you could say your devil fruit went wild. Doctorine removed her glasses. No matter what happens, you can't let yourself go down that path. Chopper repeated. The beast raised its arm. He was preparing to attack. Chopper, what are you doing? Usopp shouted frantically. Talk to us. I don't think he can, Roronoa said tersely. Damn it, I thought he said this wasn't going to happen anymore. What's going on? Nami screamed. Why is Chopper like that? What won't happen anymore? What is this? It's his. Usopp began. The present Chopper, the young one, swallowed. A power that destroys your foes but turns you against your friends and your own body as well? There's only one word for a creature like that. Tears filled Chopper's eyes. A monster. Monster point. Run. R-O-A-R. The first thing Vivi notices is the stabbing pain in her chest. As in someone had literally stabbed her there. The second thing she notices is that she's in a tomb, and it's falling apart around her. The architecture was familiar to her. It resembled temples back home in Alabasta. Scratch that, it was the architecture of temples from Alabasta. She was in the Tomb of Kings, just outside of the royal palace. How do I know that? She thought. Better question, how did I get here? Wasn't I on college just a little while ago? Her body ached so much she could barely even move her head. All she could do was roam her eyes around the crumbling room. Not far from where she leaned back against a wall, she could see a giant blue block of stone, covered in squiggly writing. A poneglyph. But how did she know that? What was a poneglyph? The princess wasn't sure why, but she somehow knew it was important. Before Vivi could ponder it further, she felt someone lift her up and heaved over their shoulder. When she looked to see who it was. Luffy? She yelled in her head. She then looked to her left to see that the pirate captain had another passenger, and Papa? Both men looked awful, to say the least. Vivi had longed to see her father for years, but not like this. Her father's arms had terrible wounds, and Luffy was caked in blood and sand. Vivi felt her usual worry take hold, strengthened a 100-fold. What had happened to her father, and what had happened to her friend? Why were they all in a tomb that was coming down on their heads? Luffy looked up. "K. Let's go." "Hold on," Vivi said. At least, she thought she said it. She felt her lips moving of their own accord, and the voice that came out didn't sound like her own. The voice she spoke in was older, more mature. It had a silky quality to it, or at least it would have if she didn't sound like she was about to start sobbing uncontrollably. It also sounded vaguely familiar, but the verge of sobbing part threw her off and kept her from recognizing it. "I no longer have a reason to live," Vivi's new voice continued, breaking angrily. "Just leave me here." "What the heck am I saying?" Vivi scolded herself mentally. She would have done it audibly, but her mouth wasn't listening to her. "Luffy, ignore everything I just said. I do have a reason to live. My country needs me, my people need me, my father needs me." In her attempt to thrash, which she couldn't do, her body refused to comply. Vivi finally got a good look at her body. After which she nearly freaked out. This body was older and tanned, draped in a thick white coat. And why the heck was she wearing a corset? You could see her breasts. "Not my breasts," she thought. "This isn't my body. Am I seeing someone else's experiences through their eyes? Why would I dream up something like this?" She glanced back up at Luffy. He was staring at her, not her, she realized, but the woman whose body she was inhabiting, with that blank expression he got sometimes. You could never tell what he was thinking when he looked like that. For a brief moment, Vivi grew concerned. He wasn't seriously considering listening to this woman's suicidal plea, was he? "You're coming with me," the rubberman said at last, much to Vivi's relief. "Do what you want once we're out of here." Vivi felt the woman's body stiffen. She could feel her outrage as well. How dare this? This boy force her to live, yet, at the same time, Vivi could sense there was also a feeling of disbelief. He didn't owe her anything. Why save her? You can't do this to me," the woman went on, earning the princess's frustration. "Just let me die, damn it." This time Luffy gave her a hardened glare as he began jumping up onto debris, making his way out of the tomb. "Why the hell should I listen to you anyway?" he asked seriously. Vivi supposed the woman didn't have an answer to that one, because she didn't reply. The only response were the hot, pain-filled tears that spilled down her cheeks. "Qua?" Vivi opened her eyes to a quiet quack and something hard nudging her shoulder. When she turned her head, she saw that it was a very concerned-looking Karoo, doing the nudging with his bill. He was sitting on the deck, and she was curled up against him. "Karoo?" she said quizzically. She smiled. "Did you wake me up because you were worried about me?" Karoo nodded. "Qua?" Vivi chuckled and stroked her beloved bird's head. "Good boy, thank you." What a strange dream, she thought. It felt so real. Could it have been like the dream Usopp told me he had? She dismissed that thought. "No," he said, his was like a memory that hadn't happened yet, and it was from his own point of view. "I wasn't me in this dream. I was someone else." The princess glanced around her surroundings. She was not in a tomb in Alabasta, but aboard the Going Merry and sailing the waters around Kala. She and Karoo were lying against the side railing. The deck was washed in a lovely golden red color from the setting sun, and the mystery fog gathered ominously on the horizon. Day didn't last very long this time, Vivi commented to herself. It had been a while since the two teams split up. She hoped Mr. Roronoa and his team found Luffy and future Usopp before night fell. Darkness would make finding their comrades unnecessarily difficult. Vivi-san, the blue-haired girl startled when she faced the speaker. It was Brook, who had been sitting against the mast with his violin. To her embarrassment, she realized he had been playing when she had fallen asleep. "Oh, hello Mr. Brook," She greeted as politely as she could. The musician still unnerved her. "Sorry I fell asleep. It wasn't a comment on your music or anything." "Yo ho ho, it's quite alright," the skeleton assured her. He played a few soft notes on the strings with his bow. "You've had a taxing day so far. I would have been surprised if you hadn't fallen asleep. You certainly look as if it did you some good. Perhaps some sleep would do well to remove the bags around my old eyes." He paused. "Aw, but I don't have eyes anymore, yo ho ho ho." Vivi smiled. Yes, the skeleton still unnerved her slightly, but when he wasn't being a pervert, he wasn't bad company. Even the skull jokes were starting to grow on her. She could see why Luffy would want someone like him on the crew, besides whole afro-skeleton part. Anyway, music can be appreciated many different ways, Brook went on, tuning his instrument. The piece I was performing when you nodded off was soft and melodic, so the fact you did fall asleep meant it soothed you to some degree. In a way, by sleeping you were giving me a great compliment. Vivi, deciding to forget about her strange dream for the time being, stood up and moved closer to Brook, Karoo in tow. Most musicians would take my falling asleep as an insult. Brook waved a bony hand. "Vivi-san, as you can see, I'm not most musicians." "You can say that again." Brook let out another laugh and returned to playing. Vivi took this lull in the conversation as a chance to see what the others on board were doing. Mr. Bushido was up in the crow's nest. Asleep as well, knowing him. Or maybe not, if he was as wary of Mr. Brook as he was Mr. Roronoa. Usopp was next to the Mary's figurehead, keeping an eye out for Mr. Roronoa's cruise ship with his spyglass. Since he neglected to mention to describe the ship as a future-going Mary or another ship entirely and Brook wasn't talking, the sniper was currently searching for any ship bearing the Straw Hats' Jolly Roger. Seeing things were being handled on the deck, Vivi took a hesitant seat in front of Brook, Karoo also quickly following suit. Brook had a frightening appearance. But Luffy accepted him as a crewmate in the future, so Vivi no longer wished to be afraid of the musician. "You know, taking into account how you dress, I don't see you as the violin type," she observed. "I can see you with an electric guitar though." Brook chuckled. "I am well taught in many instruments, Vivi-san. As for how I dress, it's just a style I picked up over the last couple years. I do though. I just left it back on the ship. I've been using it more often these days. But Luffy-san has always preferred my violin music, so that's one of the reasons why I brought it with me on the island." "Luffy really likes music, doesn't he?" "That he does. All pirates appreciate music, Vivi-san. Why, my crew before the Straw Hats was made up almost entirely of musicians." That surprised Vivi slightly. "You were on another crew before you joined Luffy's?" Brook stopped playing for a moment. "Yes, the Rumbar Pirates. But that was quite literally a lifetime ago." He then went back to playing as if nothing had happened, but Vivi felt guilty. The way he'd said that sentence had been wistful, and slightly sad. She hadn't meant to dredge up any painful memories. How to fix this? "Well, I guess it would be a lifetime ago," she said hesitantly, "considering you're an undead skeleton and all." Brook ceased playing again and gave Vivi a long stare. For one nerve-wracking moment, Vivi thought she had crossed some kind of line by making a joke in a tense situation. Her fears were laid to rest, however, when Brook broke into his usual peals of joyful laughter. "Yo ho ho ho, skull joke," Brook laughed cheerfully. "I can't believe I missed that one. I must be losing my touch." Vivi let out a sigh of relief and Karoo gave her a congratulatory pat on the head. That had been a close one. "That's what I can't figure out," Usopp's voice broke in. The sniper walked over to the three by the mast. "You're a walking, talking Afro-skeleton. How the heck is that even possible? Someone like you shouldn't be possible." "Usopp," Vivi scolded. "Usopp-san," Brook said. "We're sailing on the Grand Line. Nothing is impossible here. From what I've read about your adventures, you've already seen many of the wonders it has to offer and you have yet to even reach Alabasta." "Okay, that's a fair point," Usopp conceded, thinking of Reverse Mountain and Little Garden. "Still, I have you wonder how you're possible." He shivered and took a few steps back. "You're not some ancient pirate cursed to wander the earth as an undead skeleton, are you?" "Nothing quite so dramatic," Brook explained, setting his violin down and gesturing Usopp to sit down. When the sniper did so, he continued. "You're close though. Depending on who you ask, Some might say I am cursed. You see, I am the way I am today thanks to the revive fruit. You're a devil fruit user? Vivi asked in disbelief. Like Luffy and Tony? Brook nodded. That's right. When eaten, the revive fruit allows the user to come back to life once after death. However, its powers aren't apparent immediately. When I first ate the fruit, nothing happened, so I thought it had been a dud. That is, until I tried to go for a swim. I nearly drowned. To this day I can still feel the water filling my lungs. Not that I have lungs anymore. Yo-ho-ho-ho. That doesn't explain why you're a skeleton, Usopp said, crossing his arms. Shouldn't you still have flesh if you came back to life right away? Well, hold on, Mr. Brook, Vivi interrupted. I just realized something. Are you it's okay to tell us this? Luffy gave orders that you were not to tell us anything. Oh yeah, I forgot about that, Usopp added. Luffy-san ordered me not to reveal the future, Brook reasoned. But my origin story happened well over 50 years ago, even by your placement in time. So I'm not disobeying him by telling you. Usopp, Vivi, and Karoo looked at each other, looked up towards the crow's nest to make sure Zoro wasn't watching, then back to Brook expectantly. As I was saying, Brook went on. I didn't actually come back to life right away. I had perished in a rather foggy place, so it took my soul a while to locate my body. By the time it finally did, he wiggled his bony fingers. Well, you can see the results for yourself. Your body decayed away in the time it took your soul to find it, Vivi said with a hint of disgust. If that's the case, why do you still have hair? Usopp asked, also looking grossed out. Strong roots, Brook replied simply, sipping tea from a thermos. I don't think that's how it works, and where did you get that thermos? Brook chose to ignore that last question, opting to instead take another sip from said thermos. Usopp in turn gave him an annoyed glare, then an inquisitive one. How is he able to even drink tea, being a skeleton? Do you ever find it difficult? Vivi asked suddenly. Find what difficult? Brook inquired, turning to look at the princess. Being a skeleton. Obviously when people first see you they're going to think the worst. I mean, look at me and Usopp. We completely panicked and thought you were a monster before we even got to know you. Usopp looked guilty when Vivi said that, as did the speaker herself. Both felt bad about how they reacted, even more so now that they'd heard Brook's story. Usopp felt especially awful, for he'd held on to his dislike for the skeleton the longest. Now that they thought about it, the way they had treated Brook was not unlike how the people of Chopper's Island treated him. Panicking without learning the facts. The princess and Sniper, despite only knowing him a few days, adored the little reindeer. If he had been here, he most definitely would have been disappointed if he had come upon the same realization. Brook thought that one over for a bit before answering. Trust me, Vivi-san, you're not the first person to be afraid of my appearance and you won't be the last. You should have seen how Sanji-san and Nami-san looked when I first met them. They were petrified, but that is a tale of the future, so I won't go into detail. He set down his thermos and looked down at his hands. Anyway, I suppose I did find it difficult at first, but I've had nearly 52 years to grow accustomed to my form. While frightening, I would rather be alive and looking like this than dead and not here. It's because I lived that I met Luffy-san and the Straw Hats, and that I will able to fulfill my longest-held dream. The dream that was my reason for living all those lonely years. He looked up and turned to face the princess and the Sniper. Though he had no skin or lips, they could tell he was smiling. It is truly wonderful to be alive, no? He asked them. And to have Nakama and a reason to keep on living as well. Vivi gaped the skeleton. She was sure that Usopp was doing the same thing. They had no idea the same skeleton who had asked to see Vivi's underwear and laughed at Roronoa's nickname was capable of such words. His sincerity seemed to drive away anything they had found scary about him, and had them smiling. Ah, Vivi-san, I just remembered, while we are asking each other things, Brook went on. Perhaps would you allow me to see your Mr. Brook? Bonk. Yo-ho-ho-ho. How harsh, Usopp sighed and stood up, walking away and mumbling, way to ruin the moment, pervert. Unknown to the four on deck, Zoro had actually been listening in on the entire conversation and had found himself sweat dropping at Brook's inappropriate question. However, despite the sudden turn of events, it was safe to say Usopp and Vivi no longer held a reason to fear the skeleton. Satisfied, He slumped back down into the crow's nest to continue his partial nap. Couldn't slack off at a time like this. Meanwhile, as the undead musician laughed himself silly on the deck, Vivi thought back to his heartfelt words about being alive. It made her remember a part of her dream. I no longer have a reason to live. Vivi somehow found herself smiling. Whoever that woman in dream was, the princess hoped she had found her reason to keep on living, just like Brooke had. Yes, she said softly as Karoo nudged his head into her lap. Being alive is pretty wonderful. Location: Carrion Bounty Hunter Base Camp. Siobhan couldn't believe she was saying this, but she missed Vaughn. While irritating, he'd at least been a nice distraction at the end there. Now that he'd been gone for a few hours now, she could officially say she had never been life. And considering how many times she had gotten bored while living on Kala by herself, that was saying a lot. Not even her brief discussion with Boss, she still didn't care what his name actually was, did much to alleviate her boredom. All that succeeded in doing was putting her into a bad mood when the dolt ignored her warning. Isn't that what every lonely person wants? She mocked him in her head while glaring at her generic crony guard. Bah, what does he know anyway? Nothing, given he ignored my warning. It's his funeral and I will personally spit on his grave when he gets himself killed. Her eyes glanced around the tent. The crony guard was asleep, hence why she was glaring at him. A few random barrels were scattered about, and her father's staff on the desk. Her eyes lingered on the latter. Boss knows nothing about me or my wants, she thought. Nobody knows what I really want. Not even Captain Sama knew, and he could read me like a book after only a week. Not even my father knew. Oh great, now her eyes were getting teary, as they did whenever she thought of life before. Siobhan closed her eyes and smacked her cheeks. She couldn't let this way of thought continue, because once she started thinking of her father she started thinking of her brothers, of Renard, of the villagers, of Satatya. Dang it, she thought of Satatya. Now she was going to be in a funk for the rest of the day. Or night. Going off of the light streaming through the tent flaps, it was sunset right about now actually. Sighing, Siobhan opened her eyes, only to see a strange woman standing in front of her cage. What the heck? She shouted, jumping to her feet. She winced when she realized how loud she had been, then glanced at the crony. Luckily, he was still fast asleep. Sorry, the woman said quietly. I didn't mean to startle you. You're not real, Siobhan whispered bluntly. Oh? Why am I not real? Your inner voice sounds weird, like an echo. I'm guessing you're some kind of copy of the original, and that original is somewhere nearby. The woman chuckled. Foo, you're a clever one. I'm impressed. Siobhan rolled her eyes and sat back down. I've seen every bounty hunter in this camp, so I know you're not with Boss. What, are you one of the pirates that showed up? I am, she replied. Yeah, some of your friends might in trouble. There's this guy named Runo. Baba Runo the Dancing Haze, yes, I know, the woman replied. I've already encountered some of his comrades, and I've heard of his reputation, but my friends are capable of taking care of themselves. I'm not worried. Sure you aren't. Even if I was, I have no idea where any of them are, so there isn't much I can do. In the meantime, I could free you from this cage if you want. Siobhan chuckled hollowly. Nah, that's fine. As much as I want out of this cage, now's not the right time. You know how the saying goes. Good things come to those who wait, even if it's boring. The woman smiled. I don't think that last part is in the saying, but suit yourself. One last question though. You wouldn't happen to know if there are any ruins around here, would you? Siobhan raised her eyebrow. As a matter of fact, there were two sets of ruins on the island. The greater ruins and the lesser ruins. The lady seemed trustworthy enough, but still, she couldn't risk revealing the location of the former. There is just one set of ruins, Siobhan lied coolly. They're pretty small, and they're a good ways west of here. I can't give you specifics though. That's alright, I'm sure I'll be able to find them somehow, the lady assured her. Thank you. No problem, now get lost. As tempted as I am to talk to you about being a pirate, I don't want that crony to wake up or Boss to show up. Oh, you're interested in pirates? The woman asked. She smiled gently, maybe next time then. Siobhan didn't know how she was expecting the lady's copy to leave, but melting away into a flurry of flower petals was definitely not one of theories. She stared at the spot she had been standing for several minutes, after which the crony guard finally decided to awake. Huh? Wah. The guard mumbled sleepily. He stood up and turned to glare at Siobhan. Hey brat, what are you doing? What are you staring at? Nothing, she replied slowly. Just a tornado passing by. The guard simply raised his eyebrow, not unlike how Siobhan had done just minutes earlier. What a bizarre little kid. Time. Night at. Night. Location. Kala's southwestern beach. That's them all right, the leader of Theta Unit said, lowering his binoculars. Is it now? They have the Jolly Roger, him. He turned nervously to the him. Of all the people his squad had to run into, why did it have to be her? All they had wanted to do was salvage what was left of the silverback. Are you positive? Yari went on to ask, taking a prim sip from a china teacup. She was sitting on the back of one of his men like a chair. Luckily for the poor sap, Yari was a small woman. It is awfully dark out, even with a full moon. Theta leader swallowed thickly. Of course ma'am. Why would I give a false report to you? That'd be absurd. His men echoed his words, his agreement, completely absurd. We're sure, Ms. Yari, we would never fail you. Yari's expression clearly stated she didn't believe them for a second. I do not know. Your squad does have a representative for being incompetent. Was it not your team that had a couple of its members eaten by a freshwater sea king? Theta leader winced as one of his men started crying. To be fair ma'am, I don't think anyone would have expected there to be a sea king in lake. Failing to expect the unexpected is a good way to get yourself killed, Yari said icily, finishing her tea. She stood up and pointed her finger at the ship on the water in the distance. Well, no matter. For now I will trust your judgment. Prep the cannons salvaged from the silverback to fire some hooks. I want them reeled in and I want off this damn beach. She looked down at the pink sand beneath her boots. I simply abhor sand. But weren't you born in a desert country, ma'am? A female member of the unit, Nikki, asked innocently. She was new. Everyone else in the unit took a deep breath and stepped back. Yari slowly turned her head towards Nikki, resting her parasol over her shoulder. The smile on her face looked cordial enough, but the cold in Yari's eyes was enough to freeze even the hottest of flames. You are new, are you not? Yari asked. Nikki, was it? Nikki gulped, but nodded. Yari's smile widened in such a fashion that befitted a member of the creepy duo. You're a pretty one. I think I will keep you. Before anyone had time to blink, Yari was directly in front of Nikki, one of her long gloves off and her bare hand on the poor woman's face. Nerve. Yari whispered. Paralyzy. Asterisk. It was a horrible sight. Nikki's eyes widened as veins of dark pink light ran across every inch of her body. Once the light faded, she fell backward into the sand, her body stiff and unmoving. No one said a word. All the unit could do was dart their eyes between Yari and Nikki, as if they believed that if they dared to speak as well, they would receive the exact same punishment. This was unlikely, however. If Yari had wanted to do that to them, she would have already done so. See to her, Yari spoke finally, pulling her glove back on. And if there are no more foolish questions, I do believe we have a ship to catch. Location. Aboard the Going Merry, sailing in the waters next to Kala's southwestern beach several minutes earlier. Give it a rest, Usopp, Zoro sighed, clapping a hand on the sniper's shoulder. No, I will not give it a rest until we find that stupid ship and that stupid shipwright, Usopp snapped, not tearing his eyes away from the spyglass. The only thing you're going to find in the dark is a shipload of nothing, Zoro pointed out. Usopp said nothing. Zoro sighed. Fine, suit yourself. Vivi got some stuff out for sandwiches by the way. Arrow cook ain't here so we're on our lunch. Or whatever you want to call it. Usopp ignored him again, so Zoro shrugged and headed back into the galley. As he had said, Vivi had set out ingredients for sandwiches so she, Brooke, and Zoro could make whatever they wanted. Karoo was sitting next to the table, awaiting eagerly for the plate of food Brooke was setting down next to him. Here you are, Karoo-san, Brooke said, standing back up. Enjoy. Karoo quacked in gratitude and began eating. Vivi looked up from her food when Zoro came in. Usopp's not joining us. Zoro shook his head and took a seat next to the princess. Nah, he's not coming in until he finds the future cruise ship. I want to find it too, but his attitude is bordering on obsessive. He didn't even try to tell me the great Captain Usopp. Once discovered an ancient civilization or some other lie to convince me he could do it. Vivi pursed her lips. She had a theory as to why Usopp was acting like this. Vivi-san, is something the matter? Brook asked, pouring a cup of tea for himself and her. There might be, she admitted, taking the tea. I think I know why Usopp's so eager to find the future ship. She turned to Zoro. Mr. Bushido, do you remember what your older self said when he came to? You were listening in from outside, right? Zoro leaned back in his seat. I think he started explaining how he came to be unconscious in the woods, then asked if you guys if anything had happened before you brought him back to the ship. Right, but that's where Usopp's problem lies. Vivi said. She frowned. He didn't ask if we had brought him back the Mary. He asked if we had brought him back to the Sunny. I even asked him about it, but right after he started getting confused about his situation, so I never got a full answer. Zoro figured out where Vivi was getting at. Usopp's worried that our crew isn't sailing on the Mary anymore in the future, huh? Vivi nodded. We talked about it a little while you guys were searching along the beach. If that is the case, then it would explain a few things. Really? Like what? When Roronoa barreled onto the deck, he looked like he couldn't believe where he was standing. The princess and the swordsman both turned to look at the only future Straw Hat on board. What are you looking at me for? Brook asked, despite his tone saying he knew exactly why. You might as well tell us what we want to know, Zoro said, crossing his arms. We're probably going to see for ourselves anyway. Mr. Brook, please, Vivi added. Brook heaved a heavy sigh, though he had no lungs, and placed his teacup down on the galley's table. All right, if you wish to know. Then I'll tell you. Today marks the first day I've sailed aboard the Lam-chan. It took a second for the two to realize that Lam-chan meant the Mary, and once they did, both their eyes widened. I was a rather late addition to the crew, the skeleton went on. I've heard of the Lam-chan only through what I've read in the logbook and what I've been told about her. The only ship I've ever known with the Straw Hats is the Thousand Sunny, Vivi finished. She lowered her gaze. That was the name Mr. Roronoa said right before everything got confusing. Brook only nodded in response. That was a sobering thought. Vivi had only been sailing on the Going Merry for a few weeks and she already loved the caravel dearly. Zoro had to admit he was also disappointed, but not too surprised. Mary had been built in and meant for the East Blue, and the Grand Line was a cruel mistress. Both knew how much Usopp cared for the ship. He was going to be devastated. However, before either of the two could ask Brook any further, the ship took a heavy lurch to the left and then again to the right. Everything went sliding and the sudden motion made Vivi stumble and Brook fall out of his seat. Zoro, who caught himself before he could fall, caught the tumbling princess while Karoo caught Brook on his back. The door to the galley burst open, and there stood a terrified Usopp. "We've got trouble," he said stammered out quickly. The crew wasted no time. They hurried out of the galley and onto the main deck, where they found large hooks attached to long, thick chains buried into the starboard side of the deck. The chains themselves were coming from the far-off beach. That is, the far-off beach that was getting increasingly closer. It was a miracle the ship wasn't tilting again from the pole. "Those hooks look familiar to anybody?" Zoro asked rhetorically in deadpan. "Ah crap, the bounty hunters found us," Usopp shrieked. "And they're reeling us in like fish on a hook." "But will they gut us and eat us like fish is the real question," Brook added. "Not that I have any guts. Yo-ho-ho-ho." "Brook, don't say things like that, yo-ho-ho. So sorry, Usopp-san. Seeing as Robin-san is not with us, I felt that it should be my duty to make the morbid comments." She actually said something similar to what I just said before we arrived here. "Still, now's not a good time," Vivi shouted, suddenly not looking forward to meeting this Robin-san. Zoro ignored the other three and immediately drew all his swords, charging towards the chains. However, when he attempted to cut them, the blades just bounced off. "Damn it, they're made of steel. I can't cut steel yet," Zoro thought bitterly. When he remembered that his future self could cut steel, he grit his teeth so hard on Watto's hilt that he chipped a tooth. He turned to Brook. "Oi, Brook. You wouldn't happen to know how to cut steel yourself or know how my future self does it, do you?" "Sorry, I don't possess that ability, Zoro-san," Brook replied a little frantically. At the moment, he, Usopp, Vivi, and Karoo were desperately trying to remove the hooks from the deck but to no avail. They were lodged in too deep. Cutting steel is more for power type swordsman. I'm a speed type. Anyway. Roronoa-san tried explaining it to me a while back, but all he said was that I needed to feel its breath. What the heck does that even mean? That's what I said. In the time it took for that useless conversation to take place, Mary had ceased being reeled in and the ship was currently about 30 feet from the shore. Torches had been set up all across the sand, providing better light to see with. Not that there was anything good to see at the moment. On the beach stood a large crowd of men and women. Heavily armed men and women to be precise. The Straw Hats ran to the railing to get a better look at the enemy. Yup, there definitely were a lot of them and weapons to be seen. Alright Straw Hats, surrender peacefully. A man carrying a mace called out. We have orders to bring you in alive, so no unnecessary fighting would be preferable. Oh, since you asked so nicely. Zoro responded sarcastically, Watto still in his mouth. At least they're different than the group from the galleon, Vivi whispered. They were eager for a battle. Karoo nodded in agreement. For some reason, none of that makes me feel better, Usopp whimpered. Well, the lead hunter continued to call out. What's it going to be? Brook stepped forward, sword partially drawn. I'm afraid we're going to have to decline. Our captain would be displeased if he discovered we surrendered without putting up a fight. Luffy-san does so love fighting. Usopp, Vivi, and Zoro glanced at the musician, impressed. Rather late addition to the crew, or not, he really got Luffy's expectations down pat. Inspired by Brook, Usopp jumped up onto the railing, hands on his hips and trying to look intimidating. Brook is right. In fact, you all should be the ones thinking about surrendering. I, the great Captain Usopp, have secretly filled the jungle with 8,000 warriors, who are all ready to annihilate you all at my command. Zoro groaned mentally, Vivi slapped her forehead, and Brook just looked confused as a skeleton could look, anyway. The bounty hunters had similar reactions. Seriously? The lead hunter, Theta leader, said doubtfully. He doesn't actually expect us to believe they're added. Mr. Vaughn or one of the others would have sensed that many people on the island, the next one commented. Ha! A haughty voice mocked from within the crowd. What a wholly ridiculous lie. With the way your knees are knocking. I doubt a coward like you could get a dog to obey you, let alone 8,000 warriors. The pirate's attentions immediately snapped towards the owner of the voice. It was so haughty and condescending that they could help but not ignore it. Said owner moved through the crowd of bounty hunters, the others moving out of her way quickly so she could reach the front. The voice's owner was a petite woman in her 20s, with short violet hair that fell an inch or two beneath her chin and bangs flopping over her right eye. The visible eye was jade green with a mole underneath it, and she had tanned skin that spoke of untold hours underneath the sun odd, given she was barely showing any skin. Her clothes consisted of a purple, with pale pink underlayers, dress with short puffed-up sleeves that revealed her shoulders and V-shaped indent in the collar. It looked vaguely Lolita, save for the fact the skirt of the dress was flat. Along the collar of the dress was a white bow with a pink skull ornament, and around the waist was a white sash also with a pink skull ornament. She also wore dark pink, light pink striped stockings, dark pink boots, long white gloves that nearly reached her shoulders, and a purple top hat with a white ribbon and a red flower. Around her neck was a gold metal choker with teardrop-shaped adornments and she wore gold earrings consisting of 2 linked orbs each. Despite it being night, she carried a dark pink and black umbrella. If you wish to skip that blurb of text, just know she looked like some demented cosplayer, who happened to own a very nice umbrella. I have to say, I think I like this ship better than the one we saw you in earlier, she went on, closing her umbrella. You do not see many caravels around these days. You have a point, Zoro growled down to her, considering you destroyed the silverback, pirate hunter. She replied. She grinned widely. We accept your generous donation of 1 pirate ship along with your respective bounties. In the instant it took to blink, the creepy woman vanished from the spot she was standing. Huh? Usopp wondered. Where did she? Vivi began. Before the princess could finish, all of a sudden Brook stood in front of the 3 past pirates, his sword drawn and hold back the blade of the woman, who was now inexplicably standing on the railing. The hell? Zoro yelled. Glaring at each other, The skeletal swordsman and eerie swordswoman drew back and clashed swords several times. Both used quick, thrusting motions with their blades, almost in perfect unison. When the woman lunged her with sword, Brooke easily parried it and pushed her back. The woman did not fall, instead performing a flip off of the railing and over the pirates' heads, landing neatly on the deck. It appears we have similar fighting styles, my lady, Brooke noted with false casualness. Quite, the woman agreed, brandishing her sword in front of her. We are both speed types, we both use a fencing style, and we both wield shikomizus. She smiled. Soul King Brooke, right? It is a shame you turned out to be a pirate. I actually rather liked your music. It's always nice to meet a fan. I also like how you ignored the fact my statement was in past tense. Wait, hold up. Usopp shouted, making a timeout symbol with his hands. Was that lady going to do that thing where you cut us without our realizing it, like you did to the hunters earlier, Brooke? Yes, Brooke answered plainly. Luckily I stopped her. Her technique was so similar to mine that I was able to detect her. Compared to me though, she's very slow. You are just a skeleton, of course you would be faster, the lady admitted. No muscle or anything to weigh you down. In any case, you are not who I am here for primarily. She turned her gaze to Zoro and Usopp. I may want the Soul King's bounty on top of yours, but I have unfinished business to settle with the two of you. Zoro vaguely recalled Roronoa talking about fighting a female swordsman. He readied his blades. Huh? Why me? Usopp wailed. I have business with Roronoa because we were dueling earlier and Vaughn so rudely interrupted us. Her gaze became a hard glare towards the sniper. I have business with you because I spent the greater part of the last day entangled in your damned fly traps. By the time I am finished with you, the officers at the bounty office will barely be able to recognize you. Good thing for me you wear a mask in your wanted poster, Sniper King. If he's wearing a mask in his wanted poster, how do you know I'm this Sniper King guy? Not to say I'm not a superior sniper in my own right. Sniper King's mask has a hole cut out of his mask for his stupidly long nose. Oh, hey, my nose is not stupid. Yari ignored the sniper this time, smoothly tucking her sword under her arm as she removed her long gloves. Personal vendettas aside, I do look forward to capturing you all and taking your ship. You have been evading the Navy as far back as that wretched Dust Bowl in Paradise, and Logatown even before that. One has to wonder how long your devil's luck will last. I for one will enjoy finding out. Dust Bowl? Vivi repeated in her mind. In that moment, she became filled with anger. Dust Bowl? Are you talking about Alabasta? Vivi, this really isn't the best time for this, Zoro muttered. Quite a feat, considering his sword was still in his mouth. Shut up, Mr. Bushido. Vivi snapped uncharacteristically. I will not allow her to slur the name of my home. That caught the lady hunter's attention. I beg your pardon, but are you from Alabasta? Vivi nodded, a determined look on her face. The huntress narrowed her eyes, well, the one that was visible, then opened them wide. No way. Princess Nefertari Vivi? Is that you? Off all the things she could have said at that moment, the pirates sure as heck weren't expecting that. How do you know that? Vivi stammered. It is not hard to figure out, the huntress sighed, spinning her blade in her hand. You're the spitting image of Queen Titi. Mama. Vivi whispered without realizing it. Karoo gave her a sympathetic look. Wait, you know Vivi's mom? Zoro asked, scowling. Call me crazy, but I doubt royalty hangs out with SBAG bounty hunters like you. Is that any way to speak to a lady? The huntress sighed. Whatever, it is not like Queen Titi and I were personal friends. She just visited my village in the Badlands once when I was a child. She played with all the children that day. It was actually kind of fun. You're from Alabasta Kingdom? Brooke asked. Vivi swallowed a lump in her throat. Was she really? She thought that jewelry looked vaguely Alabastan. That is right, the huntress confirmed. Her expression became slightly disgusted. I am a former sand rat, just like our dear princess over there. Only difference is that she is still one. Sand rat. Vivi felt her blood boil. That was a derogatory term for Alabastans she'd heard too many times during her run with Baroque works. And here was a supposed Alabastan native using the exact same term. If you're really from Alabasta, how could you speak of your home so poorly? Vivi demanded to know. And what are you even doing in the New World? Zoro removed his sword from his mouth and resheathed it, but not the other two. They weren't fighting at the moment, but he had to be ready. In any case, he was somewhat curious to hear the huntress's answer. The huntress scoffed. HMPH. You have your dear old daddy to thank for that one, princess. Tell me, do the words, Baba siblings, mean anything to you? Perhaps something King Cobra told you? Vivi's outrage vanished and she paled visibly. No, you mean. The huntress removed her top hat and bowed. Baba Yari, at your service. Though, seeing as you are with pirates, my services mount interest. Last nerve. Baba Yari, 4th Lieutenant and swordswoman of the Carrion Bounty Hunters. Runo's sister, twins, I'm taking from the way you paled just now that this is not a good thing, Usopp said, removing his slingshot from his satchel. Vivi nodded. The Baba siblings, Baba Yari and Baba Runo, were a pair of bounty hunters that operated in Alabasta years ago. They were good at what they did, but they always caused a lot of collateral damage. A day came where they went completely overboard and a lot of people got hurt. I was young and inexperienced. What you do expect? Yari defended herself, placing her hat back on her head. Vivi continued her explanation. The royal army arrested them and brought them before my father. Seeing as they did catch pirates all the time and did our country good, he was reluctant to throw them in prison. So instead, he decreed that we were to leave Alabasta's borders and never return. Yari finished blandly. Yes, enough with the ancient history. Ancient history? It was only 3 years ago. It was 5 actually. Not that I am holding a grudge. Runo still harbors some resentment, but I myself was quite happy with the decision. The only thing I liked about that sand trap was the perfume. Ooh, and the clothes. The clothes were simply divine provided they were not rags. As you can see, I am wearing a Lolita Alabastan fusion design for my outfit. Mr. Bushido, Mr. Brook, Vivi ground out, ignoring Yari's outfit flaunting. When she finally decides to stop talking, cut her to ribbons. I like the way you think, Vivi, Zoro said, tying on his bandana. Sounds like a plan. May I see her panties first? Brook added seriously. Not even if you paid me. Yari answered calmly before Vivi could do so, not as calmly. But while we are asking questions, I will ask Vivi one. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in Alabasta preparing for this year's reverie? The newspaper did say your father was too ill to go this year and that you would be taking his place. Forget going pale. Vivi felt her heart skip a good number of beats. Papa is sick? How could she not know that? Strange, Yari thought. She glanced around the Mary's deck. You know. Now that I think about it. She pointed at Usopp. You were way more muscular when I last saw you. She pointed at Zoro. And you were missing an eye. Not to mention I am still trying to figure out where in the blazes you got this ship. I like caravels, but that brigantine sloop you had earlier was much nicer. Yari contemplated all the possibilities until she came up with a viable answer. Oh, I bet this is what that little snot Siobhan meant when she said others were coming, in that case. She stuck 2 fingers into her mouth and let loose a high-pitched whistle. When she was done, she called out, "Easy pickings, boys, come on up." The pirates had briefly wondered what that large crowd of hunters who had threatened them first were waiting for. It had ended up being Yari's signal. With a mighty battle cry, the large crowd of hunters charged up the still attached chains and onto the Mary. It was like being hit with a tidal wave of bodies. Usopp immediately began to frantically shoot exploding stars, and Vivi barely had any time to jump onto Karu's back and pull out her peacock slashers. "Mr. Brook," Vivi hollered over the din. "I know we're not supposed to fight without your permission, but I think we need everyone to participate for this." "I am forced to agree," Brook responded, fending off a bounty hunter that wielded a katana. And participate they did. Usopp made his way up to the crow's nest and put his sniper skills to use. Lead stars, egg stars, and exploding stars rained down on the enemy, knocking out a few, but only irritating the rest. Any hunter that tried to climb the rigging to reach Usopp got a lead star right to the forehead. Vivi rode on Karu, whipping out her slashers without discrimination. Though it did little good to actually stop them, it did distract her enemies long enough for one of her crewmates to finish the job. Mr. Brook, she called out on one instance. Yo-ho-ho-ho, yes, Vivi-san, Brook answered. He took out his violin and began playing a merry tune, party music. The past Straw Hats weren't sure what was happening exactly, but all of a sudden several of the men had enraptured expressions and some were even dancing along. Until Brook appeared behind them with his cane sword. Soul Solid. He told them it was called, in one hand and sheath in the other. Quinty Tears. He sheathed the sword, Fantasia. The small group of hunters fell, sword cuts all over their bodies. This time there was no eyes, but it was still pretty amazing to see. The small group now down for the count, Brook returned to aiding Vivi. Zoro, meanwhile, had already unsheathed Wado Ichimonji again and was attacking his own set of hunters. Tatsumaki. This attack managed to send some of them flying overboard and cut several more of them up, but it wasn't enough. Zoro decided to go for the classics. Onigiri. Much to the green-haired man's shock, the hunter in front him that he had been intending to slice up parried the attack with relative ease. Not bad, kid, the hunter said, his broadsword straining against Zoro's katanas. But you need to be faster than that to take us on. Zoro didn't let this affect him for too long. He quickly turned on his heel and lifted two of his swords over his head, bleeding the wolf. While the hunter guarded against Yubashiri and Kitetsu as they came down, Zoro was able to cut the man's stomach with Wado. For good measure, Zoro used the moment the man crouched down to grasp his wound to kick him overboard. That being done, Zoro glanced around the merry. We're barely making any progress, he thought bitterly. So many are still standing, even with wounds. The only one who's getting anywhere is Brook. Zoro usually appreciated strong opponents, but just looking at these ones reminded him of how easily his older self had taken them down. Damn it, if he could be that strong in the future, he could be that strong now. In his eye wandering, his gaze fell upon Yari. The little witch wasn't even fighting, she was just sitting on the railing observing the whole battle taking place right in front of her. Hypnosis using music as a medium, she was muttering to herself, watching Brook. I will have to tell Runo about that one. Oi, Zoro barked, walking up to her. She barely glanced at him. Oh, what do you want? You were the one going on about testing our devil's luck earlier, the young man pointed out. He aimed Yubashiri at her. Did you mean that or was it all just talk? Yari rolled her eyes. Of course I did. But I want to test the devil's luck of the Straw Hat Pirates, not a bunch of inexperienced, overconfident rookies. Again with the being called overconfident rookies. Zoro was really getting sick of that. My older self said you nearly cut his head off. Sounds to me you'd make a worthy opponent. You want to fight me? Yari asked. She chuckled. Do you have a death wish? I catch pirates from the New World for a living. You would not last half as long as your older self did. You said you never got to finish your duel with the pirate hunter. I'm not the kind of man who lets a battle go unfinished, Zoro reasoned. He lowered his weapon slightly. You're right though. You're probably very strong and I might not win. Honestly, I don't have to really win. You're attacking my captain's ship and I'm not letting that slide, so if I get you off and send you packing, that'll be a victory for both me and my crew. Even if winning was the objective, he wouldn't lose. He promised he would never lose again after all. Yari looked mildly impressed. Your conviction is commendable, pirate hunter. She stood up and held out her sword. Very well, I will fight you if that is what you want. Just do not say I never warned you. Zoro took a battle stance. Don't worry, I won't. Yari struck first. She lunged her blade so quickly timed to guard. She repeated this motion at rapid speed, stepping forward with each thrust. This kept Zoro on the defensive and made him keep moving back. He swung out the swords in his hands, but Yari skillfully ducked out of the way and swung at his legs. Zoro jumped out of the way, but not before she was able to nick his calf. He backed up a bit and lifted his swords over his head. Tora. Yari grinned. Gari. The attack never made contact. Leapt into the air long before the blades even came down. It was almost as if she knew what it did. Zoro thought all in one agonizing second. She predicted my move before I even made it. For the love of Pete, did everyone from the future know how to do that? Zoro seriously needed to know if this was an actual thing or just a fluke. Still in the air, Yari performed an artful flip and aimed her sword directly down. Coupe aérien. Plew saber. As she fell to the ground, she made lightning-fast downward thrusts towards Zoro, similarly to Luffy's gum-gum gatling. Zoro had no other choice but to simply deflect with his own swords and dodge. One slash sliced through his shirt directly down the middle, splitting the front in half and revealing his chest scar. It was at that point Brook finally noticed what the younger swordsman was doing. "Zoro-san," he gasped. "You shouldn't be fighting her, get away." Zoro grunted as he checked his chest for further injuries. "Sorry Brook, it couldn't be helped." Yari hummed appreciatively as Zoro removed his ruined shirt. "You're not bad for a younger man. I especially like the scar. It looks like it must have been painful." Zoro smirked. "It was, and I like the scar too. It's a good reminder that I shouldn't underestimate my opponents." "Well, I will admit reminders are good. You have yet to underestimate me so far. What with your only goal being getting me off the ship, not beating me," Yari agreed. She met his smirk with a soft smile, almost kindly. "Yes, reminders are good. Scars remember. Pain remembers." She stuck her blade into the deck, pretending not to hear Usopp's cries of protest, and before anyone could stop her or notice what she was doing, she was standing directly in front of Zoro, her bare hand on his bare chest, right over his scar. "What the hell?" Zoro shouted. "Get away from him!" Vivi cried out, riding on Karoo towards the swordswoman. "Vivi-san, wait," Brook cautioned, but was stopped by another hunter with a sword before he could halt her movements. Usopp looked down worriedly from the crow's nest. "What is she doing?" "Tell me, Roronoa Zoro," Yari whispered, "what does your pain remember?" "What do you, Requiem de Dolor?" Zoro's chest scar glowed with a dark pink light, and that was when the pain hit. A pain that was all too memorable. The first time he'd felt this pain, he'd already had many other injuries, so it hadn't felt all that different. The first time he felt this pain, he had managed to brace himself for it since he knew it was coming. The first time he felt this pain, he didn't even really feel it all that much because he was running on so much adrenaline that you could have removed his brain and he wouldn't have felt it. This time, however, he had none of those luxuries. Arg. Zoro. Location. On a different ship, not too far from the Going Merry. Arg. Damn. Jellyboned. Freak. The fallen man grunted, trying to get up from the grassy deck. Yeah, tell me a new one," his opponent sighed. He kept his foot on the loser's chest, and despite the latter being way bigger and physically stronger, he was unshakable. "I went through all the trouble of knocking you over, the least you can do is stay down. I'm not in the mood for resistance." The fallen man tried to get up again, only to find a pistol pointed in his face. You know that super won't work on me, right?" he asked. "Yeah, it'll probably bounce right off your steel-plated face. It will, however, succeed in getting my point across when I tell you what you needed to know." "Yeah? And what's that?" The barrel of the gun clicked. "My name is Baba Runo, and you're going to tell me everything you know about your little friends. That's all you need to know, for now."